From the top rope and the Great American Bash, I bid you all good evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you may be in this great land of ours or around the world. Welcome to the $77 million studio on the Pro Wrestle Machine. This was a rough week for the wrestling community. Let's get into this issue. Through the use of the Pro Wrestle Machine. September 4, 2023 Observer Newsletter. Deaths of Terry Funk and Bray Wyatt. AEW All-In Recap. By Observer Staff. One of the most tragic two-day periods for the pro wrestling industry took place last week, with the death of Terry Funk on August 23rd and the death of Wyndham Rotunda aka Bray Wyatt the next day. Funk, who I would call the greatest instinctive pro wrestler who ever laced up boots, was 79. Funk had been in declining health. His family kept secret about his condition for the most part and what his ailment was, but some of those closest to him were aware that he went into hospice care a few months ago. He had been in assisted living prior to that. It was known at the time that he didn't have much time left to live. He had been battling dementia for some time, and it had gotten worse in recent months. He had been in poor health ever since surgery for a hernia in 2016. He had been told by the doctor to rest in bed for 2 weeks after the surgery, but he had promised Tommy Dreamer that he would appear at some shows for Dreamer's House of Hardcore promotion later that week. So right after surgery, he flew to the Northeast. It was a terrible decision and he would later regret it, but explained that he loved Dreamer and didn't want to let him down. His instincts from childhood about loyalty to the business that he was in and around since childhood when his father was a top star, and his loyalty to those he considered friends, and Dreamer was one of those people, caused him to ignore what the doctor told him. He was in excruciating pain when he arrived, a different level from the excruciating pain he often lived with. From that point forward, even with seeing some of the best specialists in the area, none were able to fix the problems that resulted. Funk had been living with extreme pain due to knee issues from the late 1970s and back issues from the mid-1980s. There was a scene in the movie Beyond the Mat from 1996 where the doctor examined his knees and told him he couldn't even understand how someone with knee damage that bad could walk, let alone wrestle at a high level. Still, the worst was yet to come. In all the conversations I had with Funk over more than 40 years, the one that I remember the clearest was 2 days after the death of his wife Vicky, who passed away on March 29, 2019, at the age of 75. Funk was a very caring person. He had empathy for a lot of people and empathy for wrestling fans in general who in his view were much maligned. He was always saddened and you could feel it in his voice when someone that he knew was in bad shape or had passed away, but this was something much different. Terry told me he was in love with her from the first time he saw her in 6th grade. They grew up together as best friends and confidants. They were the football star and cheerleader in high school in Amarillo, and then went together to West Texas State University, now West Texas A&M, where they were still the football star and cheerleader. They got married at 21, a wedding that got local media attention since the Funk family was well known locally as Terry's father was the top babyface and ran the wrestling promotion that ran weekly at the Amarillo Sports Arena and throughout West Texas and New Mexico. Wrestling had been hard on the marriage and Vicky. At times when Terry would wrestle and I would be at shows, we sat together. I can recall a show at the ECW arena where he did a hardcore bloodbath and she whispered how much she hated the wrestling business. But she seemed to love the people in it. Terry was a wrestler on the road constantly. The two split up during the period generally considered the highlight of his wrestling career, when he held the NWA World Heavyweight Championship from December 10, 1975 to February 6, 1977. The two divorced during that period. The NWA champion at the time was the third highest paid wrestler in the world behind Andre the Giant and Bruno Sammartino. He gave that up to try and win Vicky back. He succeeded and they were remarried and remained together until her death. He was a man who had lost the love of his life and his best friend from childhood at the same moment, and was never the same. As many know, Terry Funk was extremely important in my life, both his teachings but more his advice. In theory, a guy whose father would literally beat the hell out of people in public if they called wrestling fake, and who, while not liking it at all, had to at times do the same to people locally who wanted to be pro wrestlers, would not become friends with someone whose writings were about the realities of wrestling being entertainment and not sport. But we were. I think, like in most ways, Terry's ability to see the future was the reason. When I first spoke to him, he would tell me the key to wrestling is that it's always going to evolve and you have to always look at the future. You learn from the past, of course. Japan was ahead of the curve at this point, and he would tell me to study Japan, and by doing so, you'll be 5 years ahead of the US while not always correct. It was great advice. When virtually everyone in the Japanese wrestling industry shunned the idea of following all Japan women, because their audience was not pro wrestling fans at the time, but teenage Japanese girls, He told me to study them because they were the best wrestlers in the world. I can recall wanting to go to those shows, and the Japanese fans and media would look at me and say that stuff is for teenage girls. But years later, things changed and the promotion got very popular and men started attending shows. He was always looking at the future. He loved the rookie Owen Hart, who he knew as a young child when he would come in for Stu Hart's Stampede Wrestling. They loved Dynamite Kid, Mick Foley, and Sabu, the type of people who would go above and beyond in the ring for the business. He always voted for Sabu for the Hall of Fame, saying that Sabu never got out of wrestling what he put into it, and he was revolutionary in changing the business with doing the big moves and popularizing the table spots that remain over. Because he grew up as the son of a promoter, his mentality was always about drawing. He did many famous things, most of which worked and many of which didn't. He determined which category they fell into based on whether they led to drawing money, a term he and others of his time frame used. One of his most famous angles was when we went to Florida, and to set up a feud with Manny Fernandez, I believe. He poured real motor oil over his head and said he did so because he wanted to know what it felt like to be a Mexican. In those days, wrestling played on stereotypes and heels would play on insulting ethnicities. People at the time lauded the creativity of it. Of course today, much of what Funk did in his promos in the 70s and early 80s couldn't be done, and today, he wouldn't have done them because to him wrestling was always about time and place. But that was considered a brilliant and memorable angle by most and talked about for years. But when I brought it up to him, he said it was one of the stupidest things he did. He noted his eyes burned from the motor oil and that he couldn't get it out of his hair for weeks. Another concept he pioneered was the empty arena match, which he did with Jerry Lawler in an empty Mid-South Coliseum, which also featured the unbelievable selling of the match by announcer Lance Russell. Funk's left eye dropped from damage in the ring, so at times he would do angles based on it, where a babyface would be pushed to the limit by Funk's viciousness and Funk's attempt to take out their eye with a spike or table leg. They were able to block it and then use it on Funk for revenge, and he'd blade and go hysterical with the idea that his eye was being taken out. That was Funk's climax of what may have been the first empty arena match, but even if it wasn't, it was the one that put that match on the wrestling map. In Memphis, it was one of the most brilliant concepts and famous angles ever. But Funk dismissed it to me for years, saying for all of the talk and praise, it didn't draw money. But 23 years later, when the local territory had long since died and Lawler and Corey Macklin had television and for a few years played on nostalgia of the past with Lawler to draw some healthy crowds, they brought back Funk and built a match off that famous empty arena match. The promotion was running a few big shows a year at the Mid-South Coliseum, drawing 800 to 3,500 based on Lawler and nostalgia. When they brought Funk back for Lawler off that angle in 2004, they drew more than 5,000 and would be the last crowd of that size from a local promotion. The angle itself at the time didn't pick crowds up greatly from usual, but the memories of it from a nostalgia standpoint did, which caused him to re-evaluate his thoughts after 2 decades. In later years, he was the life of the party at the Cauliflower Alley Club and other conventions. He loved seeing the wrestlers from his era and was sad when health reasons no longer allowed him to attend. Cody Rhodes wanted him at the original All In, but health issues didn't allow it. Funk always spoke about booking and wrestling as the art of manipulating people. To him, manipulation wasn't meant as a negative, but a way to manipulate their emotions to make them want to buy a ticket, and then they got there to manipulate their emotions again, to get them mad or happy by the performance, but they got their money's worth and leave them wanting to come back. WCW was not in good shape in 1989, even though people fondly remember all the great matches the company produced that year. Ric Flair as a babyface against Terry Funk was the best drawing program WCW had from its late 1988 inception until the Nitro era. But there were many naysayers, feeling Funk was too old and it wasn't going to work. They also had some of the best American matches of the era. While the pay-per-view match in Baltimore was the big one and was outstanding, there were house show matches even better. I was with him before he shot the angle in Nashville to start the program. Funk was there with Luthez and Pat O'Connor as the judges to give a decision in case the match with Ricky Steamboat defending the NWA title against Ric Flair went the 60 minutes time limit. I'd already known about the angle and he was getting in the zone. The key was that Flair would win the title back clean and there would be a confrontation with Funk, who would want a title match. Flair would say something that Funk would take the wrong way, and Funk would attack Flair and give him a piledriver on a table, which wasn't meant to break and didn't, which by 1989 standards was absolutely heinous. Flair would sell a neck injury and his career would be in jeopardy, but he would come back, as a babyface, for revenge. Funk was supremely confident in his ability to get the angle over and knew the detractors thinking he was too old to headline. 8 years later, his quest for the ECW title at 53 was the world title storyline on the company's first pay-per-view show, and his ability to draw with Lawler was 7 years after that. He said that people don't get that we're going to draw money. He said the Sunday tournament, the term used for a sucker punch, called the Sunday punch, was more important than the table because that's the shock moment of the turn and the table was the garnish to get it over. He talked about how people will remember the table, but it's the Sunday that was more important because it's the set up for the pile driver. I was backstage with him in Baltimore before the match with Flair. He was in so much pain due to back issues, getting treatment, that a normal person seeing this would think there's no way this match can be good. I'd seen him the night before have a killer match with Sting in Philadelphia, so knew it would be. The stakes were high and it's Flair versus Funk. The match was exceptional. Shortly after, there was a rematch in Chicago. Flair and others in the company were concerned. It was funny because the Flair Funk house show matches were getting all kinds of praise, but when I saw WCW people, all they talked about was how bad shape Funk was in and they had to end the program. They'd tell me he was in far worse shape than when it started. And then they had a match better than Baltimore. The program was to end with an I Quit match in Troy, New York, one of the most famous I Quit matches in history. It was also Funk's retirement match. I'm not sure which number, since he started retiring in the late 1970s when he thought his future was in Hollywood, and had one of the biggest retirement matches in history in Japan in 1983. This may have been retirement 3. Flair won with the figure 4. It was an incredible match, among the best of the decade. Wally Carbo, the AWA promoter, saw it and said it was the greatest match he had ever seen. Others echoed that sentiment. In an I Quit environment, it was Funk whose understanding of how to do a match like that was the one who made the match, although obviously Flair was a great dance partner. That year he won Best Heel, Best Brawler, Best Feud, beating out the legendary Flair vs. Steamboat feud, and Best on Interviews. Funk had tons more retirement matches. I don't know if he was serious or not. He would always tell me that he thinks this one might be it. His body would tell him he needed to get out. This would happen regularly from that 1989 match through 2017. Yes, he wrestled after the hernia debacle, doing 2 6-man tags on successive nights, teaming at 73 years old, teaming with the Rock and Roll Express in Raleigh and Spartanburg against Lawler and Doug Gilbert and Brian Christopher. The Spartanburg match on September 23, 2017 ended up being his actual last match at the age of 73. It was 2 years after he wrestled Lawler on a tribute show in Jackson, Mississippi, in a street fight. By that time every match was his last match, and by that point he probably figured it was, but if he told people, nobody would believe it, as the Terry Funk retirement is one of wrestling's biggest tropes. After he turned 54, Funk often talked about his father's death, at 54, from a heart attack. His father, a former collegiate wrestler and tough shooter, was at a family barbecue, eating and drinking, and began a real wrestling contest with Leigh Thornton, another noted shooter, when he suffered a heart attack. Terry rushed him to the hospital and Terry saw his father die. He became very concerned about death when he got to the age his father died. He would often go through in his head the circumstances of his father's death. After the death, Terry and brother Dory Funk Jr., himself one of the greatest pro wrestlers of all time and a former NWA champion and Japanese icon, inherited the territory. Terry may have been the first major owner to see the future of the business and the death of the territories. It was in the late 70s when he would talk to fans at shows in West Texas, and instead of asking him about the talent in the territory and talking about the angles on television, they would ask him about Georgia Championship Wrestling, which aired on cable, and talking about people like Tommy Rich and Tony Atlas. Funk realized that their territories simply couldn't compete for fans' interest with the stars on Georgia television, even if they were not coming into West Texas. At that point he realized that small market promotions, like his territory, were going to die. Then the company started breaking even and even began to lose money in 1978. Nobody else saw this that early, and most didn't see that future until the mid-80s when that future became the present. But Funk knew the inevitability was they couldn't run profitably when people saw people they thought were bigger stars on cable television. He was going to close the territory down, but Dick Murdoch and Blackjack Mulligan asked to buy it. Unlike almost anyone else who would have taken the money and been happy to get something out of it, Funk tried to talk both out of it. He explained what the future was, but neither Murdoch nor Mulligan understood it. Funk didn't sell for a high price, but Murdoch and Mulligan suffered heavy losses trying to keep the territory afloat before giving up in 1980. Jerry Kozak and Ricky Romero tried to keep local wrestling alive after Murdoch and Mulligan could no longer do so, but they only lasted until 1981. The Funk brothers were iconic in Japan. They would rank among the biggest foreign stars in the history of the country. Both became big stars with the JWA after Dory defended the NWA World title in Japan. When Giant Baba left JWA to form All Japan Pro Wrestling, his closeness with the Funk family gave him the NWA recognition for the Japanese market. While Eddie Graham was able to get New Japan into the NWA a few years later, a move the Funks tried hard to block, only All Japan could get the world champions. After Dory Funk Sr. died, it was Dory Jr. and Terry who were the main foreign talent bookers for All Japan, and both had a major hand in creative. Terry was the person behind the Stan Hansen jump from New Japan to All Japan. Hansen, who had played football at West Texas State, although after Funk had graduated, was the hottest opponent for Antonio Inoki, and Funk got him to jump by doubling his contract pay, and they kept it secret. After finishing the 1981 New Japan Tag Team Tournament, in one of the most memorable moments in Japanese history, Hansen came to ringside to attack Terry and lariat him during the 1981 All Japan Tournament Finals where Bruiser Brody and Jimmy Snuka beat the Funks in one of the biggest matches in Japan of the era. It created the Brody and Hansen tag team and its biggest feud with the Funks. Funk had far more hits than misses when it came to new talent. He told me that Ricky Morton would soon be one of the hottest babyfaces in wrestling when he saw him as the tag team partner of Ken Lucas in San Antonio. He told me about Mitsuharu Misawa early on, before he became Tiger Mask. In 1987, I was at dinner with him and he introduced me to Kenta Kobashi, who was a few months from making his debut. Kobashi was Baba's boy, doing tasks for Baba like washing his back and such. Kobashi was polite and smiled, and when he left, Funk said that he was going to be one of the greatest ever. He could just see that in him. While Funk always praised his generation and the likes of Jack Briscoe, Harley Race, and Johnny Valentine, he did later tell me he thought Misawa, Toshiaki Kawada and Kenta Kobashi may be the three best of all time when they were having their classic singles and tag matches with each other. To modern fans, while Funk worked for WCW and WWF afterwards, it's the ECW run that many think of as his last hurrah. I'm always hesitant to try to encapsulate a life like Terry Funk's within a soundbite or even a portion of a program, said Paul Heyman on the bump. I didn't say anything publicly. I haven't yet, and one of the reasons why is because I was aware of the decline in Terry Funk's health and I had the extraordinary opportunity and pleasure of speaking with him in the last few weeks of his life. I withheld my tributes because I got a chance to tell him while he was alive. I didn't have to explain my affinity for the man after his passing. I got a chance to let him know. There was no, pun intended, acknowledgement of the greatness of the performers of ECW without them getting into the ring with Terry Funk. Shane Douglas was recognized as a franchise player because of his interaction with Terry Funk. The Public Enemy truly got recognized as a preeminent tag team of their time by being in the ring with Terry Funk and the Funk brothers. Terry and Dory Jr. Sabu came out of the gates in ECW making a splash, but his splash was infinitely bigger because by the end of Sabu's first weekend in ECW, he was in the ring and holding his own and sharing the spotlight with Terry Funk. I don't know if there is anything that I can say that will match the brilliance of what Cody said. What Cody said the other night moved me. It was profound and just so eloquent in that you could be going through an airport and, "Here, you egg-sucking dog," and go, "What am I listening to? Who is screaming is that? And here's Terry Funk coming." It's so Terry Funk for him to do, and at the same time, he was the grandfather of a revolution, of an evolution in the industry, of a movement, of an extreme movement. What I wish future generations will take from the legacy of Terry Funk is the passionate pursuit of greatness in all moments of a performance and never losing sight that it's a business. After that, he was in a dumpster match with WWF and the dumpster was thrown off the stage to the floor. Funk never talked about it publicly, but he was hurt pretty bad in a very unsafe stunt in the dumpster. He said that he suffered a buttocks muscle injury that would no longer allow him to control the muscle in one side of his butt. As we've noted a few times, pro wrestling has never been the top-rated show for the week on network television. On August 25th, WWE presented a SmackDown show honoring Bray Wyatt and Terry Funk. Of course they were going to do so for Wyatt. He had been one of the company's top stars for many years and was loved by the wrestlers in that company. I felt it was very classy that they did the same for Funk, who I expected they would honor with a video since he was in their Hall of Fame, but not to the extent of which they did, which included a Cody Rhodes in-ring promo. It was due to Wyatt more than Funk, but it was still the combination that led to SmackDown doing its biggest rating in years. The 0.76 rating was so high that it had a real chance. But Notre Dame football on Saturday did in 0.94 and an NFL preseason game on Sunday did in 0.91. The highest of the week was the Republican Party debate, but that was on cable. It would have been cool for the first time in wrestling history that this happened would be related to Funk and Wyatt, but that didn't end up being the case. The death of Wyatt was the #1 searched for topic on the internet on August 24th with 2,000,000, which by modern standards is an incredible number, ahead of Donald Trump. For the week it was number 3 behind only Isro and Hurricane Idalia. The Death of Funk was number 5 on August 23 with 200,000. No biography of Terry Funk could possibly do him justice, and this week there is simply not the time to do it. There will be a big one soon, as there will be for Wyatt and Abe Jacobs, who passed away on August 21 at the age of 95, believed to be the second oldest still living wrestler behind Mexican wrestler Dick Madrano. Bray Wyatt, a third-generation pro wrestler from a famous wrestling family, who was a creative genius, passed away suddenly at his home in Claremont, Florida, on August 24 from a heart attack. Wyatt was born Wyndham Lawrence Rotunda on May 23, 1987. With the name Wyndham Rotunda, he almost had to be a pro wrestler. He was named after his mother's maiden name, the daughter of Robert Blackjack Mulligan Wyndham, and sister of Barry and Kendall Wyndham. Lawrence was the real first name of his father, better known as Mike Rotunda. Rotunda was a college football player and wrestler at Syracuse University. He was good enough to go to the NCAA tournament as a heavyweight but never placed. He did place highly in several major national tournaments. Mike Rotunda was probably best known for his portrayal of the character IRS, a heel created by Vince McMahon out of frustration because of past IRS audits. Wyatt created 2 memorable characters, the first with the lantern, the music, rocking chair and cult-like powers over monsters like Luke Harper, Eric Rowan, and Braun Strowman. The second, based on the Firefly Funhouse, was The Fiend, a man of supernatural powers. The Firefly Funhouse was created in 2019, with a group of puppets based on being the Scary Hill version of kids' television personality Mr. Rogers. Mercy the Buzzard was named after the former WWE character Waylon Mercy, played by his Uncle Barry's former tag team partner Dan Spivey. Abby the Witch was named after Sister Abigail, a name he had used as a character who never was revealed but he named his finishing move after Ramblin' Rabbit, who continually died and was brought back to life. Huskus the Pig, named after his previous gimmick. Husky Harrison claims he was needing to lose weight, and even Vince McMahon was occasionally used as a puppet. The Fiend was a merchandise success and one of the hottest characters in the company, even with the issue of being very difficult to have a good match with. Wyatt first became WWE Champion on February 12, 2017, winning an Elimination Chamber match over Dean Ambrose, Jon Moxley, Baron Corbin, AJ Styles, John Cena, and The Miz. He lost the title on April 2, 2017, at WrestleMania to Randy Orton. As The Fiend, he was made unstoppable, using the mandible claw popularized by Mick Foley as his finisher. The idea was for him to run through everyone, destroy legends, and be the most powerful force in WWE until meeting with Roman Reigns. But that never happened. The Fiend beat Seth Rollins on October 31, 2019 in Saudi Arabia, to win the Universal title. He went through a series of people, including having perhaps the best singles match of his career with Daniel Bryan. The plan was to beat Bill Goldberg and face Reigns. McMahon decided that with Goldberg's bigger name value, even though he'd built friend all year, that WrestleMania would be best headlined by Reigns versus Goldberg, and decided to switch plans and put Goldberg over for the title on February 27, 2020. Goldberg was to lose the Universal title to Reigns, but with the COVID scare and Reigns having had leukemia twice, he backed off wrestling at WrestleMania and Braun Strowman beat Goldberg for the title instead. Instead, The Fiend beat John Cena in a taped Firefly Funhouse match. He then beat Strowman for the title at SummerSlam on the night Reigns returned. At Payback the next month, Reigns won the title in a 3-way over Fiend and Strowman, by beating Strowman. The next year, Fiend was in a feud with Orton for WrestleMania, where the indestructible character lost clean to an RKO in just a few minutes and the character was killed off. Everyone expected a return in some form, but on July 31, 2021, he was released. It was kept secret from almost everyone as to the reason, but he had heart issues already. Multiple sources told us that off the record, noting that few were aware of it. He never wrestled for the next year, even with great demand for him from other companies. At one point TNT was told of a date for him to debut in AEW, but it fell through, believed to be money related. Impact was interested, as was AAA and Japanese groups. He did nothing and then pushed the idea of him returning using the name Wyndham 6. He pushed the name in social media, but before ever using it, he went back to the old character, signifying a return to WWE upcoming. He did a long drawn-out comeback, teasing his debut with clues, and at one point the tease went so well they delivered a tremendous television rating based on viral clues. He returned on October 8, 2022, at Extreme Rules. He feuded with LA Knight and destroyed him, and was at first set to wrestle Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. His last televised match was a win overnight at the 2023 Royal Rumble in the Mountain Dew pitched black match, which was short and poorly received. He did some more quick house show wins overnight with his final match on February 26 in Rockford, Illinois, in a lights-out match. Lesnar asked out of the match. It was nothing personal, just felt it was the wrong opponent for his character. Wyatt was to face Bobby Lashley, but after the match was announced, it was simply forgotten. There were teases of it and then they stopped as well. We reported it as a health issue, although we were told off the record it was a serious case of COVID, but the expectation was he'd be back. However, the COVID was serious enough that it caused even more damage to his heart. After his death, family members told the police that the COVID he contracted in early March led to serious heart complications, including him having a weak lower part of his heart. At the time, the health issues from his heart were considered very serious. COVID has been known to cause severe heart inflammation that we call myocarditis, noted Dr. Alex Patel, a Canadian doctor who is an expert on COVID. The condition is similar to what a lot of people are linking with the vaccine, but its magnitude more common with COVID itself. When you get inflammation of the heart, it can cause heart damage called cardiomyopathy. Cardiomyopathy 1, if it doesn't recover, can cause heart failure and leave you prone to arrhythmias and sudden cardiac death that can eventually result in death. But in recent weeks, Mike Rotunda said that Wyatt was getting better and was expecting to return to WWE. However, his issues worsened. A week before his death, he was hospitalized with a heart issue. He had a follow-up appointment on the morning of August 24 where he was told to continue to always wear an external heart defibrillator because of the concern of sudden cardiac arrest. He then told fiancée Hosanna Offerman, a former Total Divas character who did some wrestling before becoming a ring announcer, that he was going to take a nap. She got concerned when she heard his alarm had gone off and he didn't wake up or turn it off. She said he was in his bed and not breathing and turning blue. She called 911 while her mother attempted CPR, and he was rushed to the hospital where he was pronounced dead. TMZ reported that it is not known if he was wearing the device his life would have been saved, but obviously it would have increased the odds. Investigators found the device inside his car parked in the driveway. It was a very emotional time on SmackDown with the talent all teary-eyed and former Wyatt family members Rowan, who is not with the company, and Strowman, who has been out of action due to neck surgery, in the front row with Paul Levesque and Cody Rhodes. Rhodes was there originally to work the dark match main event. He had known Wyatt since both were very young as the two families were linked. Rhodes was also Wyatt's pro when he was Husky Harris on the NXT competition television show's second season. After the show, 15 WWE wrestlers and employees went to Greg Mosier's tattoo studio in Louisville. Strowman, Karrion Kross, Scarlett, Shotzi, creative team member Rob Fee, ring announcer Mike Rome, television producer Tamario Thomas, production staff members Josh Jackson and Brian Frustet and 6 others got tattoos of the Wyatt Moth logo. On Raw in Memphis, Becky Lynch ended the show holding up a Bray armband and Seth Rollins said "Yowie Wowie," one of Wyatt's catchphrases in a promo, and put a Fiend side slate on his world title belt. There were several other subtle references to him on Raw and on AEW's All In pay-per-view show. He had gone through a variety of names early in his career before the Wyatt gimmick. Among them were Alex Rotunda, Axel Mulligan, Moon Mulligan, Tank Mulligan, Tank Rotundo, Husky Harris, and Duke Rotundo, the latter named after the Dukes of Hazzard TV show with brother Taylor Rotunda as Bo Rotundo, which later became Bo Dallas. Taylor Rotundo had returned to WWE as Uncle Howdy. At first the idea was for Wyatt to build to a match with Howdy at WrestleMania, but that plans ended up changing and Howdy was not being pushed at that level and the character dropped. Alexa Bliss, who is associated with Wyatt years earlier in doing a female monster gimmick, was about to go back to the gimmick when he became ill. She later got pregnant, so the plans never developed. Wyndham Rotunda was a star high school and college athlete. In 2005, as a senior at Hernando High School in Brooksville, Florida, he was state high school champion in the 275-pound weight class as well as a high school football star. He was a contemporary of Big E, who was state champion at the same time at 215 pounds. He gave up wrestling after high school. He continued in football, going to the College of the Sequoias Junior College in California, where he was a second-team JC All-American offensive guard. He then went to Troy University where he played 2 more seasons. He got publicity while in college due to his father and grandfather being well-known wrestlers. After his football eligibility was up after the 2008 season, he left college midway through his senior year and was signed by WWE and sent to Tampa, where the FCW developmental territory was located. He started wrestling in the FCW developmental territory in 2009 and got praise for his quickness for someone so heavy, and started on the main roster in October 2010 as part of the Nexus Group. All In set the all-time paid attendance record for pro wrestling on August 27 at Wembley Stadium, thanks to a strong last 2 days. The signs just a few days out was that the show would come close, but ultimately fall just short of that record. There was a big late pickup sales that allowed them to cross the finish line and break the record either the day before or the day of the show. We had been told they topped 80,000 paid well before the show started on the day of the event. It was notable that from a public standpoint, instead of announcing total attendance on the show and releasing it to the media, as AEW has announced for its shows when it does make announcements, and how WWE does it, often inflated for major shows, on the broadcast only announced paid attendance at 81,305 and calling it a new world record. The presumption is that the previous record for paid was 79,800 for WrestleMania 32 on April 3, 2016, at a tent stadium. Others in AEW said that for historical purposes the decision was made to release the accurate paid attendance number after the show. In the post-show press conference, Khan, when asked about total attendance, said that if you add comps of several thousand, and hospitality suite booth attendance, the total in the building was about 90,000. WrestleTix listed it as 82,140. Given 5,000 to 6,000 comps out, the way attendance would normally have been reported for an AEW show would get you to 86,000 to 87,000. But not all comps are going to come, although they are counted by most organizations that do attendance like boxing and wrestling. All historical attendance numbers not inflated would have included those fans. My presumption is that they announced the paid attendance because it was the most important number they felt historically, and because of the setting of the all-time record. Khan did give the other number but not on the broadcast, and nor have they promoted the larger number. For total attendance, they would not have set the record because of the 2 shows in North Korea in 1995. The WWE's prior Big 3 of all time, which were WrestleMania 3 at just over 78,300 with 75,700 paid, SummerSlam 1992 at 79,127 and 78,927 paid. Yes, just 200 comps, and WrestleMania 32, which had a confirmed 80,709 in the building. There was no mention or statement by AEW about WWE numbers or mentioning WrestleMania 32, the prior record holder. Perhaps that's also why they emphasized paid attendance record, because announcing 87,000 or 90,000, and then saying the total attendance record in theory would have led to people bringing up the higher announced figures by WWE for WrestleMania 3 and 32, and it would have muddled the issue. When I asked Zane Bresloff, who promoted WrestleMania 3, how many people they could have gotten had the building been larger, he responded, 78,000, and that nobody was turned away. The 1992 SummerSlam was at Wembley Stadium, but that was not the same Wembley Stadium and this show. That building was torn down and this show was in the new stadium that was larger. When talking with people familiar with the ticketing of both shows, they said that this show started on day 1 about 5,000 tickets ahead of the pace of the WWE show in 1992 on the first day, and that stayed consistent until the day of the event. The 1992 show was a legitimate sellout and this show was not, but from a ticket demand standpoint, this show is very slightly ahead, and at far more expensive prices as the gate was 4.6 times larger. No merchandise numbers for the show are available. Given the size of the crowd and circumstances, one would expect it to be among the largest of all time and likely the biggest for any show not called WrestleMania. The other contender for the largest verifiable crowd, the October 22, 1933, bout with Jim Londos versus Cola Queriani with George Tragos as referee in Athens, Greece, was listed in newspapers at the time as 70,000 to 110,000. Steve Johnson, who is doing a book on Londos that will be released soon, has researched it and said that at the time Pantheatic Stadium was set up to hold 60,000 at the time, but ticket sellers would split tickets and resell them, and that 70,000 were in the stadium and 15,000 to 20,000 more were watching on hillsides outside of the stadium, which was in a valley. But those people, who were spectators, wouldn't be counted as attendees in the stadium, which would also explain the wide variation in how the number was reported at the time. I have seen old footage of the crowd and it looked gigantic, even bigger than the modern shows aside from North Korea. You know the saying that people were jammed in like sardines? Well, in this case, they really were. It also should be noted Wikipedia listed the capacity for the stadium as 80,000 during that period, and it was clearly sold out and there was an overflow because of the way they gimmicked tickets to overflow capacity. But Johnson's research indicates 70,000 as the number of ticketed spectators at the show. For this show, there were a decent amount of empty seats in the stadium, and while it was called sold out, I wouldn't label it as such. They were still selling tickets the night of the show and nobody was turned away because there were no tickets or seats left, which to me is the definition of a full sellout. We were told capacity was set up for more than 84,000 until the days before the show, and they began opening up new sections that were not open previously in the final days. There were people in those new sections, some of which were completely full and others of which had a number of empty seats. On one side of the stadium behind the hard cam setup had the expected obstructed view seats empty, but you couldn't sell tickets there unless there was nothing else left, but above those seats were open sections with some in it but not close to full. It would be a difficult record for WWE to break, as if they were to run a major show at the stadium, they would probably have a much larger stage set up for a Mania type of event, which likely could sell it out 2 nights in a row. That would make actually getting more people an impossible, although certainly they would announce a number of something over 90,000 for both nights, most likely if they were to have Mania at the stadium, or if they try another major pay-per-view show there. The other stadiums they have run Mania in over the past several years simply can't put that many in. There are stadiums in the US that could, but they aren't in markets where the local governments would be expected to make a viable bid to get the show. It would be hard to believe AEW could get this for the show next year, and Tony Khan did say that they may use a larger stage next year, and if so, that would cut back on the number of people they could get in. But I don't see how taking capacity from probably around 90,000 or more to 80,000 next year will result in people being turned away. The gate was not announced publicly, although company officials did say that it just topped $10 million, but fell just short of the $10,286,884 for the second day of WrestleMania this year, which would have made it the largest gate since 2019. When Khan first announced $10 million the week of the show, it was not quite at that number but was close enough to round up, but did break that mark with the late sales. It was the largest gate for a non-WrestleMania pro wrestling show in history, but that had been known for months, as it passed the $8.1 million at Clash at the Castle in late May and was well ahead of the $8.5 million for SummerSlam at Ford Field before that show happened. It was the 8th show to hit the $10 million mark, obviously all WrestleManias. But given the advance gate for both nights of the 2024 Mania shows in Philadelphia, both are believed to be ahead of this one, and even if not, will break it fairly soon. When WWE announces a gate, they include the service charges from the ticket outlet, which most, but not all, concerts, sports events, etc. don't do. When AEW has listed gates in the past, they have not included that number, although it looks like they may have for one of the recent pay-per-view shows. Based on last year's difference between the announced numbers counting the Ticketmaster gross and the actual final verified numbers, it would indicate May $19.85 million for 2 nights, meaning both will easily top $10 million, but it's possible both are slightly shy of it today. The previous $10 million shows are April 17, 2013, MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, John Cena vs. The Rock at $11.3 million, estimated $10.4 million without charges. March 29, 2015, Levi's Stadium, Santa Clara, California, Roman Reigns vs. Brock Lesnar. Seth Rollins later added in on the day of the show, at $12.6 million, est. $11.6 million without charges. April 3, 2016, Atant Stadium in Arlington, Texas, Reigns vs. Triple H at $17.3 million, $15.9 million without charges. April 2, 2017, Camping World Stadium in Orlando, Florida, Reigns vs. Undertaker at $14.5 million, est. $13.3 million without charges. April 8, 2018, the Superdome in New Orleans, Louisiana, Reigns vs. Lesnar at $14.1 million, as $13.0 million without charges. April 7, 2019, MetLife Stadium in East Rutherford, New Jersey, Becky Lynch vs. Ronda Rousey vs. Charlotte Flair at $16.9 million, est. $15.5 million without charges. April 2, 2023, SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, Reigns vs. Cody Rhodes, $10,286,884, a figure that doesn't include charges. No merchandise numbers were officially released, but the number was in the $1.4 million range. The first show at Wembley was a risk that paid off huge. The first show in Europe was going to be the biggest show in company history. While there were those in the UK who predicted a first-day sellout, which didn't happen, most figured far lower numbers that ended up happening. It was the first show in history where the major story building it up and the key marketing of the show was not the angles or the matches, but what the actual attendance would be and potentially being part of one of the largest crowds in history. This was the first show in history where the attendance itself may have been the biggest draw of the show, along with the first AEW event in Europe. While WrestleManias, Rumbles and SummerSlams these days don't draw so much based on the matches and the main event like big shows of the past, they draw mostly based on the name and prestige of the shows due to decades of history. This had no history behind it, and while MJF and Adam Cole can claim to have been in the main event of the largest paid attendance of all time, they were not the primary draw like Hogan and Andre or Bret Hart and Davey Boy Smith were, nor was the name all in itself the big draw like the name WrestleMania has been for so long. It was also notable that as far as local publicity went, the 1992 show was said to be far bigger due to the fact you couldn't go anywhere and read newspapers without mentions of Smith and the show, whereas being in London for days before this show, you would not have known that there was a wrestling show in Wembley or that wrestling fans were in town from all over the world anywhere but at the Wembley Park train station where there were posters for the event. The show looks to be a major success on pay-per-view. It is already the most purchased AEW show for the year and the biggest is Double or Nothing 2022, Adam Page vs. CM Punk main event. Depending on late buys, it is likely to end up between second and fourth when it comes to AEW's biggest pay-per-view shows. That is impressive for a number of reasons. First, with a noon Eastern and 9 a.m. Pacific start time, that alone should greatly hold down buys. In addition, when it comes to European pay-per-view buys, one would think a very large percentage of the people who would have bought the show were actually at Wembley Stadium, but not buying it live. As far as late buys go, the show aired on August 31st in a 5-hour block on free television in the UK, making there no need for someone in that country to buy the show late. The current estimates are 20% to 30% above the recent shows. If those numbers hold up, that would indicate 168,000 to 184,000. A lot is dependent upon late buys, which are a high percentage for pro wrestling these days. Television buys at press time were up 31.5% from the Thursday after Forbidden Door, which, if ends up being similar in the end for streaming, would be 184,000. But streaming probably will end up lower due to so many potential buyers in the stadium and it airing free on television in the UK. The key is if the late buys end up similar to the last few shows. Of those buyers, 41.9% purchased Forbidden Door and 58.1% did not. Of those who purchased SummerSlam on pay-per-view, 5.1% purchased All Out and 94.9% did not. There were no movie theater numbers because the show wasn't offered in theaters due to most theaters having a $4 for any movie all-day gimmick, and thus it wasn't economically feasible to run theaters. The September 3rd All Out show will be at theaters, as is usually the case. The show was considered a major success to the point that Tony Khan made the decision to go back to Wembley Stadium on August 25, 2024, and the hope is to make it an annual August tradition. After the show, Khan talked about annual traditions, and said that next year he would be doing All In at Wembley and again doing All Out the next week in Chicago, continuing that tradition. He said he would like to continue that as a tradition going further with All In at Wembley on the bank holiday weekend and continue the Chicago tradition as well. It feels very difficult to promote two major shows so close together. Obviously, a second show will be very different from the first. From what we understand, AEW considered 40,000 as a financial success for this show because expenses were high, and Tony Khan himself was said to have expected 50,000. So in running a second show at Wembley instead of the O2 Arena in London, as WWE did for Money in the Bank and sold out instantly, a success would be hitting the 40,000 mark next year. Predicting far into the future is hard, but it's a risk, and its possible year 3 would be difficult based on AEW's patterns in major markets because of the cost. Still, there is a long time, and who knows where things will be in a year, let alone 2. It's hard to say if 40,000 is doable. It's far from a lock, but many expected AEW to not come close to 40,000 for this show. When AEW comes back to a market the second time, while it does usually decline from the first time, it rarely is cut in half, so by that standard, it seems like a safe bet. But this situation was so unique. Obviously, if it doesn't work at the stadium for follow-up events, they could run it annually at the O2 Arena. There were tickets for this show purchased from 70 different countries. Also, just the idea of an event at Wembley itself is a draw. But if the draw is being part of what would be one of the biggest wrestling crowds in history, and the first time in Europe aside from being at Wembley, all of those market conditions are not there for show number 2. A crowd like this isn't drawn because of a hot angle or a main event people want to see, as is usually the case, but for the idea of a special event. Nothing against the card itself, which turned out to be for the most part good to excellent. The main event of MJF vs. Adam Cole, while the hottest act in the company, was most certainly not a match that in January anyone would have predicted to main event a show that broke the WrestleMania 32 record that had appeared safe for many years to come. Khan was almost emotional at one point over breaking the record, with the first time pretty much admitting that the company had not been as hot as it had been in the past. He said that the company peaked with the signings of Cole, CM Punk and Bryan Danielson 2 years ago, and the peak ended in June 2022 when all three, and others, were injured at the same time. He categorized this as the biggest night by far in company history and in his professional life and said that you rarely get a second chance. He indicated the belief that this show will propel the company to greater heights. From the standpoint of being able to make bigger business deals, there's that possibility. From the idea of momentum off this show building more fans to watch and buy tickets to shows, that is a hope, but there is no sign of it. Khan also mentioned 2 new pay-per-view shows, the October 1st date in Seattle today after an already announced Collision taping in the same city, and November 18th in Inglewood, California, at the Forum, which the company didn't announce but has been reported here a few weeks back. The belief is that Collision will be airing that week on a Friday, also from the Forum. The October 1st show will be called Wrestle Dream. A major note is that it will be a Sunday night show, meaning for the first time AEW will be going against NFL Sunday Night Football for a pay-per-view. Khan had in the past always avoided the NFL, for obvious reasons. Even worse, the game will be the New York Jets versus Kansas City Chiefs, meaning Aaron Rodgers versus Patrick Mahomes, and it is expected to be the highest-rated Sunday night game of the season. It also means 3 pay-per-view shows in 5 weeks. The show will be a tribute to Antonio Inoki, who Khan put over as a dreamer who influenced the business all over the world. The date will be the first anniversary of Inoki's death at 79. It would be great if Khan could also honor Terry Funk on the show, who fit many of the similar criteria as Inoki. Honoring Inoki would seem to indicate New Japan talent on the show, and Khan, when asked, did say there would be. But the date is the middle of a New Japan tour. New Japan has a Korakuen Hall show on October 1st and Tomohiro Ishii, Hiroshi Tanahashi, Jeff Cobb, Shingo Takagi, Yota Tsuji, Minoru Suzuki, Kazuchika Okada, Tetsuya Naito, Hiromu Takahashi, Sonata and David Finlay are booked on that show. Key guys not booked would be Will Ospreay, Hiroki Goto and Yoshihashi. It will probably need a photo finish, but Bryan Danielson was told he could return in October, and being in Seattle, that would be the place if everything goes well and if he can cross the finish line by those dates. The biggest news after the show involved an incident that involved CM Punk and Jack Perry. It took place in Gorilla right after Perry had lost to Hook. Perry had just done a rolling thunder off the roof of the car that he and Hook were fighting on top of. Perry did the move with Hook laid out on the windshield, and then Hook gave Perry a fisherman suplex on the window, and the glass shattered. Perry looked at the camera and yelled, "It's real glass and go cry me a river." That was in reference to an argument between the two before a Collision show where Perry was going to do an angle where he'd take a bump on real glass to do an injury angle that would lead to him missing television for a week. He had planned a week off for a vacation to Hawaii which had already been approved and was just looking for a storyline explanation and to build up a future match. Punk and Perry had an argument that night with Punk saying they didn't need to use real glass, and the reality is with the injury rate being so high, always better to do the safer alternative. However, AEW had already approved of the spot and a car was there for the angle that was to take place on the Saturday show. We were told of the incident when it happened, although not the details. But were also told after the argument that things were settled, so it wasn't really a story past a disagreement. But like everything, it lingered. Whether rightly or wrongly, many of the talent thought it was Punk yelling at a guy primarily because he had liked a negative tweet about Punk shortly before he returned, and that was the real reason. In this case, his advice seemed to make sense, but the situation is stuff that people are going to view everything within the frameworks, and most of the time it is within that framework. And the fact was it had all been approved by the company before the discussion took place. We were also told that Perry never said anything about it and other wrestlers said it was settled. Then Punk or those close to him when the Ryan Nemeth story came out. They brought up the Perry incident. Perry thought it made him to the public look like he was trying to find a way to miss a show the way some reported it. But he didn't answer back publicly at the time the story came out. Then he made the remark to the camera on the show. There are seemingly a dozen versions of what happened next. In the big picture, there was an altercation as Punk confronted Perry, which got physical, in front of numerous witnesses, including Tony Khan, who was running the show from Gorilla. One person close to Punk who wasn't there, but had talked with him, said he tried to help a young guy to prevent him from doing something dangerous with glass. Some have said that as a veteran he could or should have done that. But given all the situations and tension, it didn't work out well. Another person who was in a backstage position with another company noted to us that they didn't think this was good protocol, saying that Punk should have relayed it to one of the producers, as it is their job to handle that, or relayed it to Khan, who ultimately is the person in charge of those decisions. Nick Hausman essentially presented the Punk side. He said Punk was in Gorilla since his match with Joe was next. He said Perry walked past him and Punk asked Perry if he had something to say, and the conversation escalated. The version from either Punk or someone close to him said that Perry asked Punk to do something about it. That version was that Punk shoved Perry and Perry shoved back. Punk then grabbed Perry in a choke. This was reported by others as a guillotine choke by others, with the idea of just holding him there to defuse the situation and that he didn't want to fight Perry and no punches were thrown as far as he knew. That version was that Punk asked security if it would be better if he left the building and was told that nobody was going to ask him to leave, but it might be better if he did. Punk agreed, left on his own accord, ordered Nando's, a British snack, for some of his friends to eat together after the show. The version that Perry told people is that he was leaving after losing and got backstage. Punk came up to him with a lot of people around and said, "Do we have a problem?" Perry said no. Perry then said to Punk that he said stuff that got online about him in that line, using the term Crimea River. It was noted that Perry probably didn't need to say the line during the match, but wrestlers do that all the time, whether to get their frustrations out or to pop friends in some form. It would have been no big deal to anyone except he should have known better because it was Punk. The version Perry apparently said included that Punk then said words to the effect of, "You know I could 3-star you up at any time, right?" That version was that he then pie-faced Perry and tried to put a guillotine on him and also threw some punches that were awkward from the position Punk was not doing any damage while Perry grabbed Punk's arm to try to keep him from locking in the move. Samoa Joe came in and quickly broke it up. Perry didn't have a bruise or scratch on him past those that he got from his match. Brody King, who is tight with Punk, ended up being mad, and one version of the story told by many is that he punched a wall and may have broken his hand, although he claims differently. King did end up breaking his hand, but he said it was during his match. King later claimed he never punched the wall, but did say he kicked a garbage can and then broke his hand during the match on the guardrail. However, other reports by those there have claimed to witness his punching the wall, and the word in the dressing room was that he may have broken his hand or wrist hours before his match started. I don't see why he would make up a story, yet others have outright said that when people reported his story that they were being worked. So who knows? It is possible that he punched the wall and people thought he broke his hand and then actually broke it in the match, which would be quite the coincidence, and it is possible with all the goings on that people thought it was a punch when it was a kick. Security took Punk into his dressing room. Punk was then screaming at Khan and swearing at him. While this was going on, the announcers and production people were told to stall because at this point nobody knew if Punk versus Joe would happen. Nobody except those who saw the situation knew why, only told to stall before the first match. Unlike with other situations, the belief is that there were surveillance cameras with footage of all of what happened. Jim Ross noted that he was planned for a major entrance at the show, and because of what was going on backstage, which happened right before he was to go out, he was told to just go out to ringside in a low-key manner. They did briefly play his music, got the pop, and he waved to the crowd. The belief is that Joe convinced Punk to have the match and the show then went in the order it was originally scheduled to go. Another version, and this would be a neutral source who was not a wrestler but was there and witnessed it, and his version was that right after Perry came to the back, Punk went nose to nose with him aggressively and asked him if he had a problem. That person said Perry said he was just looking to get heat as a heel. Punk shoved him hard, Perry got in his face, and in that version Punk sucker punched him and went for a choke. People immediately broke it up and Khan was yelling at Punk to let him go. That person said that once they were separated, Punk lunged in Khan's direction, but a number of people got in his way while Punk was yelling "I quit." Monitors were knocked down during all this. Joe was very upset and went to calm Punk down. Another person said that many of the wrestlers think both Perry and Punk were at fault, and when the talent found out, they got more motivated to put on great matches. It kind of brought everyone together, and Samoa Joe was a real leader, was one comment made. After the incident, Punk said it was quitting. He was scheduled in the pay-per-view opener against Samoa Joe. It was serious enough that Khan made the call for the Young Bucks and FTR to open the show. They weren't quite ready as they figured they had nearly an hour before their match was to start. Kenny Omega then offered to have his 6-man tag go first, since they were scheduled for second anyway and were pretty much ready, and the Bucks versus FTR would start early as well. They asked others, including Chris Jericho and Will Ospreay, to go out earlier, but they also weren't ready since Jericho's match also included his singing his entrance. At least some of those involved, if not all, were not told at the time what the reason was when asked, although the word traveled very quickly. The announcers were told to stall, and at the same time the 6-man tag participants were getting ready, and just as they were about to play the music for that match to start the show, Joe convinced Punk to do the match as scheduled first, and they went out and did the match. Perry was kicked out of the building. Punk had security with him to take him to the dressing room. He left the building shortly thereafter. His side claims he left on his own, while the other side said it was management's decision for him to leave. There had been complaints going on that if Perry was kicked out that Punk should have been as well. After the show, before the first question at the press conference, Khan said that there was an incident backstage, and that an investigation is taking place about it. He said at this point that is all he would say about it, but confirmed that it did happen. He never mentioned Punk or Perry's name or anything about the incident. Both were suspended. We do have it confirmed that an investigation of the incident by AEW started almost immediately, and all eyewitnesses were expected to be talked with, and some already have been. The timing is a disaster since All Out is on September 3rd at the United Center in Chicago, and Collision is the night before, and Punk was the big draw for those shows. It is believed that Punk vs. Ricky Starks for the Real World title was scheduled to be the main event for All Out. Khan was asked if Punk would be at All Out, and he said he can't comment, and said the investigation is ongoing, and said please bear with us. He also said that their goal is to give the fans an answer to that question by Sunday. That may have been why nothing happened in London to set up the All Out main event, even if it was only 7 days away. It is known that WBD suggested more pay-per-view shows, and Khan has certainly indicated the same, so whether that's traditional pay-per-view or making a deal with Max and if they are related is not known at this time. But Khan did bring up there are two ways, basically the WWE way where the pay-per-views are part of the subscription package, and the UFC way where the streaming service buys the rights and sells them themselves at a regular pay-per-view price, while also forcing those who want to buy them to subscribe to the serve to do this. The main event saw MJF retain the title over Cole after the two of them had opened the show with the first of the show's 4 title changes. They went to a double pin finish, but Cole demanded 5 more minutes, and MJF said 5 minutes wasn't enough and that they needed to go to the finish. They did all kinds of stunts where each teased hitting the other with a foreign object with the ref down, but neither did, and MJF won with a cradle after Cole refused to hit him with a belt shot. The title changes saw MJF and Cole win the Ring of Honor tag titles from Aussie Open in the first match of the buy-in show. Hook beat Jack Perry to win the FTW title also in the pre-show. On the main show, The Acclaimed and Billy Gunn won the Trios title from the House of Black, and Saraya won a 4-way over champion Hikaru Shida, Britt Baker and Toni Storm to win the women's title. The Trios title change had to happen based on the way the program had been worked. The Ring of Honor tag title change pretty much had to happen for that story as well. The Saraya win was obviously to get a big pop in the UK market, as was Will Ospreay's win over Chris Jericho. Hook beating Perry for the title surprised me, and that match led to the biggest behind-the-scenes story of the week. Although with Perry threatening to retire the belt, Hook winning back the title his father put on the map does make sense. The tag title situation was actually the biggest question. I expected FTR to retain over the Young Bucks. It could have gone either way, as either team could have won that match. FTR was more over on TV of late, although both were over as faces in the building. The impression we had is that nobody knew until the day of whether Khan would still go with FTR or make a change due to Cash Wheeler's arrest. He decided to not change plans. During the match at one point, fans were singing Cash Has Got a Gun to the tune of Aerosmith's song Janie's Got a Gun from 1989. Khan said the early pay-per-view numbers based on streaming were the highest in more than 1 year. One would have expected that, given the idea of AEW before 80,000 fans had been pushed for weeks on television and was pushed as the biggest show in company history and a night that would make pro wrestling history. While the show should have done more European pay-per-view buys than any show, the fact is that a large percentage of the people in Europe who would have bought the show instead attended live. Some of them may still buy late. In addition, the announcement was made on August 23rd that ITV4 would be airing the show from 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. on August 31st, a 5-hour window on a 4-day delay. At least for the UK market, a lot of TV fans would get to see the show itself, with the idea of growing the promotion in the market based on more people seeing the show besides the ticket and pay-per-view buyers. The plus in the UK was also for pay-per-view. The show aired from 5 to 10 p.m. as opposed to midnight to 5 a.m. That was a negative in the US market because it started at noon on the East Coast and 9 a.m. on the West Coast, which normally would hurt buys a lot. But I'd expect replay buys in the US to be strong. But with it on free TV, replay buys in the UK market would likely be small. There were no big surprises on the show as far as run-ins or angles. Jeff Jarrett and Grotto didn't end up having a match, but they did an angle before the buy-in show started that also included a momentary confrontation where Paul White knocked down Satnam Singh. Mercedes Moné was shown in the crowd twice. The story we had heard was that she was likely to wrestle on this show before her injury. Being shown twice indicates that she's probably going to do at least some dates here upon her return. Khan, when asked, only said that she was not medically cleared at this time. Later he said that he doesn't expect her cleared in time for the October 1st pay-per-view show. There's an interesting trivia note regarding the name All In and it being the new term for the planned annual major pay-per-view event in the UK by pure coincidence. Pro wrestling in the UK in the 1930s was termed All-In Wrestling, to differentiate it from amateur wrestling. Later the term changed to Catch as Catch Can. But that is pure coincidence, as Tile Margaret Runnels, who came up with the name in 2018 for the show Cody Rhodes and the Young Bucks promoted, would have had no idea of that. Regarding the star ratings here, I was at the event live in the press section, which was far away and very different from watching on TV. The ratings are based on that vantage point, and it would be better to watch the show again, but I haven't had the time since returning. All-In started about a half hour before the pre-show. Powerhouse Hobbs came out and did a promo. He challenged Miro to come out. Miro cleaned house on him and said that next week, a jacked Bulgarian will make you humble. Jeff Jarrett came out and did an anti-UK promo and pro-US, saying that all the good wrestlers came from the US. He said World of Sport wasn't any good and ran down Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks and put over how the real wrestling was the stuff promoted by the Crockett's, the Von Erichs, Eddie Graham and the Jarretts. Paul White came out with Grotto and Anthony Ogogo. Show dropped Satnam Singh and took out Jay Lethal. Grotto got Jarrett's guitar and broke in over Jarrett's head. 1. MJF and Adam Cole beat Aussie Open to win the Ring of Honor tag titles in 6:56. Aussie Open jumped MJF and Cole before the match. Cole at one point wanted MJF to do a dive, but he wouldn't. It was simple, giving the people the kangaroo kick MJF had planned, which was dropkicking both guys at the same time, and then they did the double clothesline finally for the pin on Kyle Fletcher. The crowd popped big since they built that spot up for weeks and hadn't done it successfully until here. Cole and MJF had a stare down after the win, and Cole took his new belt and left. 2 3/4 stars. 2. Hook beat Jack Perry at 8:24 to win the FTW title. Perry came out in a limo, which was the key to the match. They fought around and on the car, including Perry giving Hook a suplex on the roof, a rolling thunder off the roof, and the senton off the roof on Hook on the windshield. Hook gave Perry a fisherman suplex to shatter the windshield. This is where Perry did the line that precipitated this week's story. Perry was bleeding from the arm from the glass. Perry teased doing a coast-to-coast drop kick and then didn't do it, which got a lot of heat. Hook was also bleeding from his back. Hook hit Perry with a garbage can and put on the red room for the win as Perry tapped. 3 1/4 stars. 3. CM Punk retained the Real World title over Samoa Joe in 13:56. Punk came out and a lot of fans were singing his song, while others were booing him. The crowd was mixed early, got way more for Joe as the match went on, but when Punk won, the crowd popped like he was the face and cheered Punk a lot. Another story is that before the show started, a story going around was that Punk was insistent that Justin Roberts not announce his match. Whether this was Roberts being on his Christopher Daniels list or he pushed for the idea that the Collision ring announcer, Dasha Gonzalez, should do Collision-based matches. Gonzalez also did House of Black vs. Acclaimed and Billy Gunn later, is not known. Punk did some Terry Funk rope spots. He botched a Hurricane Rana, and that gave the crowd a chance to boo him a lot. When Punk blocked the Hurricane Rana and Joe threw Punk into the barricade, Joe go a big pop. Punk bled. Punk did John Cena spots and Joe did Hulk Hogan spots. Punk later used the spinning toe hold to honor Funk. Joe looked really good here. Punk won with the Pepsi Plunge, his Ring of Honor finisher from nearly 20 years ago. 3 stars half. 4. Jay White and Juice Robinson and Konosuke Takeshita beat Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi and Adam Page in 2026. The Guns came out with the White and Robinson and Takeshita team. Don Callis came out as well and went to the commentary desk. Omega and Ibushi did a double leapfrog spot with White. Omega did a snap Rana on Takeshita and the Terminator dive. Omega missed a crossbody and White took over. White used a dragon screw and started playing air guitar like Hiroshi Tanahashi. Page made a hot tag and did a plancha on Robinson, a tope on White and another tope on Robinson. Ibushi still looked rusty here. Omega and Ibushi both did moonsaults to the floor, although Ibushi slipped it first before doing it. Omega threw White into a German suplex by Page and Ibushi did another one. Omega did the Snapdragon suplex on Robinson and White, but Takeshita used a Blue Thunder Bomb on Omega. Omega used a Poison Rana on Takeshita. Page did a fall away off the top on Takeshita. Omega hit the V-trigger on White 3 times and Takeshita then schoolboyed Omega for the pin. 4 stars half. 5. FTR beat Young Bucks to retain the AEW tag titles in 21:46. Great match as expected. It was one big move after another. Crowd was really hot for this match. Nick used a Fosbury flop and later a senton on an elevated Cash Wheeler. Matt did some Bret Hart mannerisms and got booed. This is when fans were chanting Cash has got a gun. There were dueling chants. Dax Harwood did 3 German suplexes on Matt and Matt did 2 Northern Lights suplexes on Harwood. They traded another German suplex and another Northern Lights suplex. Nick did a moonsault to the floor on Wheeler. Harwood did the Davey Boy Smith pinning Bret Hart from Wembley Stadium spot for a near fall. They did each other's spots. Harwood kicked out of a stuffed piledriver. The Bucks tried the BTE trigger but ended up kneeing each other when Harwood moved. Wheeler hit a tope on Nick. They kissed Matt and hit the Shatter Machine on him, but he kicked out. Wheeler missed a springboard 450. The Bucks hit the BTE trigger on Wheeler and Harwood saved. The Bucks gave Harwood the Shatter Machine and then gave Wheeler the BTE trigger for a near fall. The Bucks tried a Meltzer driver and that was turned into the Shatter Machine for the pin. FTR went to shake hands after the match but the Bucks walked off. 4 3/4 stars. 6. Eddie Kingston and Orange Cassidy and Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta and Penta beat Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta and Ortiz and Mike Santana in 21-21 in a Stadium Stampede match. This was basically the same as Anarchy in the Arena, except it was in a stadium. This was the Bloodbath Brawl. The building gave a lot of limitations on what they could do, such as not allowing any ladder more than 8 feet to be used. Still, this was totally wild. They just brawled all over the place. Some loved it and some didn't like it and it seemed to be the most polarizing match on the show. The live crowd was super hot for it though. Kingston was constantly after Castagnoli. Moxley used a branding iron as his Terry Funk tribute. Moxley bled first. Moxley pulled out skewers but Penta got them and jabbed them into Moxley's head. Kingston and Castagnoli ended up in the royal boxes. Santana did a piledriver on a chair on Penta, who was then taken out of the match. Moxley used a fork and kept stabbing Cassidy in the head with it. Cassidy bled. Yuta and Taylor were fighting in the parking lot. Kingston jammed an umbrella in Yuta's mouth. Santana and Ortiz powerbombed Beretta on a ladder and he was bleeding. Moxley suplexed Beretta on a barbed wire board and then gave him a piledriver on the ring steps. Ortiz used a fork on Cassidy. Fans were chanting for tables and Ortiz got a table. Trent's mom Sue somehow drove the minivan from the Northeast to England. Moxley kissed Sue and Beretta went crazy. Sue handed Beretta and Taylor cookie sheets but these ones still had the cookies on them. They were pounding on Castagnoli and Moxley. Penta returned but as Penta Oscuro. Penta hit a Canadian destroyer on Santana from off a ladder through tables. Yuta pulled out a screwdriver but Taylor got out of trouble and hit the awful waffle on Yuta. Moxley did a dive. Castagnoli did a long giant swing on Cassidy. Beretta suplexed Ortiz off the top rope to the floor through tables. Cassidy taped his hand and dipped it in glass. Kingston came out with a chair wrapped in barbed wire. Kingston used spinning back fists on Castagnoli and Moxley and tackled Moxley through a table. Cassidy hit an orange punch with his taped up hand with glass on Castagnoli for the pin. 4 stars half. 7. Saraya beat champion Hikaru Shida, Toni Storm and Britt Baker to win the AEW Women's title in 8:43. This was basically a showcase for Saraya, telling the story of the British star who thought she would never wrestle again who then wins the world title before a record crowd. Saraya and Storm argued over who would pin Shida at one point. At another point Saraya's mother Julie, who wrestled under the name Sweet Saraya Knight, sitting in the front row, interfered and held Baker. Storm went to hit Baker, who moved and hit Saraya's mother. Saraya then attacked Storm. Ruby Soho tried to get them to make up but Storm hit Soho by accident. Saraya used the former PTO on Storm trying for a submission, and Baker curb stomped Saraya. The finish saw Baker work for the lockjaw on Shida, while Saraya used the spray paint to the eyes of Storm and hit the former Rampage on Storm to get the pin before Baker could get Shida to submit. The entire Knight family jumped into the ring to celebrate with Saraya. 2 3/4 stars. 8. Sting and Darby Allin beat Swerve Strickland and Christian Cage in a coffin match in 15:48. Christian replaced our Fox. Fox had assured AEW that he could get into the country but they found out just days before that he couldn't. As punishment they kicked him out of Mogul Enterprises and shot an angle for Christian to get in. Rappers Flash Garments and DJ Who Kid wrapped Strickland to the ring, and he was wearing Jimmy Rave's old robe as a tribute. Sting did a video as Joker Sting. Allin used coats with thumbtacks out of the coffin. Sting used a cricket bat on Prince Nana and Strickland. Christian taped Allin's arms behind his back and Strickland attacked Sting with the cricket bat. Allin, with his arms behind his back, did a springboard moonsault and a tope con gyro. Sting untied Allin's hands. They beat up Strickland. Sting tried to splash him off the apron through a table, but it didn't break. Sting then jumped off again, basically landing butt first, and put Strickland through the table. Allin put Christian on a chair and came off the top rope to the floor with a dropkick, knocking Christian out of the chair. Christian was put in the coffin and they were about to shut the lid when Luchasaurus made the save. He gave Allin snake eyes through the coffin door. Nick Wayne ran down and hit Luchasaurus with a skateboard. Luchasaurus no-sold it, used a headbutt and choke slam onto the skateboard and took Wayne backstage. Allin went for a coffin drop off the top rope onto Strickland on the coffin, but Strickland moved and Allin landed on the coffin. He was out of action for a while and Sting was on his own. He got the Scorpion Deathlock on Christian, but Strickland hit Sting with a chair, which he no-sold. Christian used a low blow with a baseball bat on Sting. Strickland put Sting in the coffin and put his bat in there, but Sting used the bat to block the door shutting. Strickland went for a 450 on the coffin, but Sting moved and he crashed. Allin used a belt shot on Christian and Sting hit the Scorpion Death Drop on Strickland on top of the coffin. Strickland tried to get out, but the lid was closed and he was a sandwich. Allin did a coffin drop onto the coffin, crushing Strickland's back. Strickland fell into the coffin and the door was slammed on him for the win. This match really over-delivered. 4 1/4 stars. 10. Will Ospreay pinned Chris Jericho in 15:25. An expected excellent match. Jericho came out with Fozzy playing and Jericho singing his way to the ring. This was the entertainment highlight of the show. Even though this show had a WrestleMania crowd, it didn't feel like WrestleMania. It didn't feel like Wrestle Kingdom. Really, it felt like a great wrestling show before a huge crowd, which is what it was designed to be. But this was a WrestleMania moment and this match was probably the hottest except for the main event. Even though a heel on television with Don Callis, Ospreay got the biggest reaction on the show except for MJF. Fans sung both men's songs as they came out. Ospreay hit a sky twister to the floor and hit Jericho in the head. Jericho was hurt by the move but kept going. They did their trademark stuff. Jericho used a German suplex on Ospreay, who did an incredible sell job. Jericho did a top rope Frankensteiner. He went for the Lionsault but Ospreay got his knees up. Ospreay draped Jericho on the top rope and hit a shooting star press. Ospreay went for an Oscutter but Jericho hit the Codebreaker. Jericho hit a second one for a near fall. Ospreay hit the Oscutter and went for Stormbreaker. Jericho turned that into a Hurricane Rana and the walls of Jericho. Ospreay escaped and as Jericho charged, Ospreay hit the Spanish Fly. Jericho used a Codebreaker and Oscutter. Jericho, who was the face for the American audience based on the angle, worked as a heel here because the crowd was so behind Ospreay, and flipped off the crowd. Used a low blow. He hit the Judas effect but Ospreay kicked out. Ospreay used the Hidden Blade and Stormbreaker and Jericho kicked out. Ospreay then used a Hidden Blade and Stormbreaker for the pin. Ospreay noted that he had beaten Kazuchika Okada, Kenny Omega, Shingo Takagi and Chris Jericho in a 2-month period. After the match, Sammy Guevara tried to console Jericho, who shoved him away. 4 3/4 stars. 11. Billy Gunn and Max Caster and Anthony Bowens beat Brody King and Malachi Black and Buddy Matthews in a no-holds-barred match to win the AEW Trios titles in 9:15. The House of Black came out with a lantern while the lights were out and the fans took out their cell phones in a Bray Wyatt tribute. The commentary brought him up as well. Black did a moonsault to the floor on Caster. Matthews did a flip dive. Gunn teased doing a dive and the crowd went nuts but he didn't do it. King then did a dive. Gunn again went for a dive but Julia Hart jumped in and slapped him. Gunn told her to suck it. Caster spread Hart's legs and Bowens came off the top rope with a leg drop to her crotch. They showed Mercedes Moné again. Gunn hit King with a chair. King got a chain but accidentally hit Black. Caster gave King a low blow. Gunn and Cass did Famousers on Matthews. Gunn was distracted by Hart and Black hit Black Mass but Gunn kicked out. Caster hit the mic drop on King, who kicked out at 1. Gunn hit a Fame-Asser on King, Bowens hit the Arrival on him and Caster did a mic drop for the pin. The House of Black acted as faces and handed their belts over and the Acclaim talked about Gunn getting to be on top again and they did what they called the world's largest scissors party. 2 stars half. 12. MJF beat Adam Cole to keep the AEW title in 27-27. The crowd cheered both men loudly but clearly MJF got the louder cheers. They put their t-shirts on and fans chanted "He's our scumbag" at MJF. They traded standard stuff early. MJF poked Cole in the yes. Both did hair pulling. Cole did a super kick and took MJF's shirt off. MJF hulked up but Cole raked the eyes. MJF kept teasing dives but would hold up but finally hit one and acted shocked that he did. They traded great near falls. MJF gave Cole a powerbomb onto his knee. Cole came back with a short heatseeker piledriver but MJF got his foot on the ropes. Cole gave MJF a brainbuster on the ring steps. They teased a countout but MJF got back in at 9. MJF set up a tombstone on the announcer's table but then didn't do it. But Cole did a tombstone on the table and got MJF in the ring and MJF kicked out. Cole hit a Canadian destroyer and MJF hit a superkick and both went down. Both men clotheslined the other and both went down and pinned each other at 19:05 and it was ruled a draw. Cole asked for 5 more minutes which didn't make much sense given you say that when you go the time limit, but played off Cole wanting 5 more minutes in their TV singles match. MJF said no to the 5 minutes and said we're going to go until there is a winner. MJF tried a pin with tights. Cole ran into ref Bryce Remsburg. MJF grabbed a chair. Cole went down. Both did Eddie Guerrero fake chair shot laydowns. Given a DQ win means nothing for Cole, the idea of this made no sense but the crowd enjoyed it. After Remsburg got in, MJF hit the heatseeker for a near fall. Cole used a cross-arm German suplex on the apron and a Panama Sunrise on the floor. Cole threw MJF back in the ring and he kicked out. Cole went for another Panama Sunrise. MJF pulled Remsburg into the path and Remsburg took the move. MJF pulled out the ring, but after soul-searching, refused to use it. Roderick Strong kicked MJF low. Cole didn't see it. Strong told Cole to finish him. Cole used the Panama Sunrise and boom, but there was no ref. Cole covered MJF and the crowd counted to 15. Remsburg recovered and MJF then kicked out. Strong threw the title belt to Cole and told him to hit MJF since Remsburg was groggy. Cole teased doing so, but stopped. Strong was furious and left. Cole was distracted and MJF got the pin with a small package. Cole was furious. MJF told Cole that they still love him and he got lucky. MJF grabbed the Ring of Honor tag belt and told Cole he still had that. Cole slapped it away. MJF called Cole a fake piece of shit and threw the AEW belt at him and turned his back, daring Cole to hit him. He told Cole he was never his friend. Strong yelled for Cole to hit MJF with the belt shot but he wouldn't do it and hugged MJF. Pyro went out and they hugged in the ring to end the show exactly like Bret Hart and Davey Boy Smith did 31 years ago. Strong left and was consoled by Matt Taven and Mike Bennett. The match was done very well and kept the crowd's interest. The negative was that Defy, Rev Pro and AEW all used the double ref bump spot on the covers with no ref in their title matches in a 2-day period. It's not AEW's fault and you're talking maybe 4,000 out of 86,000 or so saw one of those 2 shows. But it is something way overdone in title matches in WWE as well. But the storytelling was very good and the wrestling was strong. 4 stars half. WWE already broke its all-time 2-event WrestleMania gate record for the shows on April 6th and April 7th at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. Tickets to the public for the individual shows went on sale on August 18th after a few days of pre-sales and dual event tickets were put on sale with virtually all available tickets selling out quickly. WWE released to sports business reporter Darren Rovell that they had already broken the record set for a 2-day WrestleMania, and a later press release said that they had hit $21.6 million on more than 90,000 tickets sold on the first day, actually a few days with the pre-sales where most of the tickets were sold. They had topped $92,000 and $22 million, including service fees, by August 21st and would be a little above that number right now. They claimed in the press release that they had topped the final $21.5 million at SoFi Stadium between the 2 shows for this year's WrestleMania on the first day they put tickets on sale. Most seats made available were sold almost instantly. Based on the size of the stadium and the usual staging, the capacity for that stadium for a major show would be about 62,000. If you figure normal comp levels at 5,000 that the paid would be roughly 57,000 each night. At this point about 46,040 tickets have been sold for the first night and 46,125 for the second night. It appears that tickets are being held back, because the current setup is for 62,000 but at least 16,000 of those tickets were not put on sale. Some would likely be held back for later releases, and that 10,000 would likely also be set aside from business-related comps, which usually range from 4,000 to 8,000 on a WrestleMania show. There were 750 tickets left for the first night and 665 left for the second night to purchase as of August 31st. There are sections near the hard cam and the top 4 to 6 rows in the upper deck that were not opened up at first. They have also not opened seats behind the stage. There also may be sections not yet opened up because they are waiting to move all the tickets now before opening up new sections, and will open more up when new tickets are needed to sell, as they want to fill every section before opening up new ones, which is standard procedure for WWE and AEW shows. It should be noted that the actual gross combining both days of last year's WrestleMania was $19,749,071. WWE announced $21.3 million after the show because they include Ticketmaster fees as part of the gross revenue, and then listed $21.5 million in its latest press release. Most sports and concerts don't include the Ticketmaster fees a part of the gate, but there are those that do. Historically, when it comes to pro wrestling records, nobody ever did that, but WWE has done it now for years. The actual SoFi Stadium figures were $63,243, paying $9,542,187 for the Saturday show, and $64,288, paying $10,286,884 for the second show, but that was an audited number that would have not included Ticketmaster fees. The WWE announced a gross of $17.3 million for WrestleMania 32 in Arlington, Texas at Etant Stadium, which minus Ticketmaster fees would be about $15.9 million. Including Ticketmaster fees, that would make the average ticket price per person at that show being $216.79. Ticket prices for all events have gotten much higher since 2016, which is one of the reasons individual market ticket gross records are broken with regularity by WWE as well as other sports and concerts these days. However, WWE did cut back individual event ticket prices when moving WrestleMania to 2 dates. Of course, the vast majority of ticket buyers will purchase both shows. Based on the reported $21.3 million figure last year and the 127,531 tickets sold, the average ticket last year went for $167.02 and $334.04 for both dates. This year that has been raised to an average of $240 per date and $480 for 2 dates, or a whopping 43.7% increase over last year's price, and both nights would be the highest average ticket price ever for a pro wrestling event, breaking the Dallas record. The secondary market is also very strong. The quick sellout is largely due to that secondary market, since there has been an 81% increase in tickets sold on the secondary market in 1 week from the total figure for the SoFi Stadium shows. The average secondary market sale has been $330.65 for the Saturday show and $346.83 for the Sunday show. After getting into golf and leading to a merger with the PGA, Saudi Arabia's next move has been to purchase interest in the PFL. The PFL announced on August 30 the new deal, which many believe will also end up with PFL purchasing Bellator and making a big play for UFC fighters when their contracts expire. SRJ Sports Investments, a division of the Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund, has acquired a minority interest in the company. Part of the deal is that they will fund an expansion with regular shows in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. They will also hold some pay-per-view shows going forward in Saudi Arabia. The new money will help the PFL grow to 6 regional leagues by 2026, with the idea of having champions all over the world and local promotions who appear in their region on primetime television. The top fighters will then meet in a Champions League. The Middle East promotion is set to launch in the second quarter of 2024. They said the first pay-per-view show will be in the first quarter of 2024 and would feature Francis Ngannou, Jake Paul and Kayla Harrison as the top stars. In the press release announcing the new venture, they said the new investment money would allow the PFL to sign more top-name talent, will help fund global expansion, host pay-per-view shows in Saudi Arabia. This ended up having a major effect on both the WWE and the Endeavor business. Wall Street was of the impression that the PFL, given the almost unlimited funds the Saudi government has used when it comes to going into other sports, that this could be disastrous to UFC's domination of the MMA landscape. Because the WWE stock price is heavily tied into UFC business, since the two are about to become partners, it also took a tumble. Endeavor dropped from $24.20 per share before the announcement to $21.89, a drop of 9.5%. WWE stock dropped from $115.44 per share to $96.55, a 16.4% drop. What is notable is that the very negative judge rulings and opinions in the UFC antitrust lawsuit had no effect on either UFC or WWE stock, but the idea UFC could be getting very serious competition in its marketplace. Ari Emanuel pushed the idea that the valuation of the two companies together would be $21.3 billion, but right now the stock market value for the two companies is $14.5 billion, with the WWE at $8.029 billion. WWE and AEW have PPVs this weekend, with probably each company's weakest big show lineup in recent memory, and for AEW, the weakest pay-per-view show ever, both for marquee value of the lineup and for hype. In both cases, they are coming after majorly successful events, but WWE has had 4 weeks to breathe while AEW will only have 1 week. WWE Payback will be on September 2nd in Pittsburgh at the PPG Paints Arena, and is just about sold out with 12,475 tickets out. The secondary market get-in price is $70, so even with a weak lineup, the concept of a WWE pay-per-view show itself has led to pretty strong interest levels. The main event at this point is Seth Rollins defending the world title against Shinsuke Nakamura, a wrestler who until this program started was pushed at the low mid-card level. The show doesn't have Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Cody Rhodes, Drew McIntyre, Gunther, or at this point, the Usos. The number 2 match, the tag title match, is basically the same match we see every week in the main event spot on Raw in some fashion. There may be a few matches added the night before on SmackDown because they are 6 deep and decided against Gunther versus Chad Gable for the pay-per-view, putting it as a television match. But for all the booking praise the company should get and does get, it was very clear they booked through SummerSlam and had no ideas after. Lynch vs. Stratus was supposed to end at SummerSlam and was moved back a month late. Even 1 month ago they weren't doing a thing to get Nakamura ready. Rhodes should have had a new program. I would think they may have a WWE Women's title match added in some form, given they do have a direction there. Other bouts are Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn versus Damian Priest and Finn Balor for the tag titles, Trish Stratus versus Becky Lynch in a cage match, Rhea Ripley versus Raquel Rodriguez for the World Women's title, Rey Mysterio versus Austin Theory for the US title, and The Miz versus LA Knight. Even on paper nothing jumps out at you. The tag title should be good, but we've seen it, and it's likely more about Priest and Balor teasing a split. Nakamura has yet to perform at the pay-per-view main event level in years, so this will be a big test for him. But whenever he's been put in these situations, he doesn't deliver at that level, even though Rollins historically does. All Out on September 3rd in Chicago at the United Center has 9,049 tickets out and a $29 get-in price, showing that AEW isn't hot right now. Still, Tony Khan did say they would end up with another $1 million gate, which for AEW is success. The same complaint about doing a big show and having no follow-up seems to be the case here. There is no AEW title match, no AEW tag title match, no AEW women's title match, although they did seem to build up Saraya versus Britt Baker and have 2 TV shows to get there. Circumstances of the past week seem to indicate, unless a late decision is made, no CM Punk, no Chris Jericho, and the world champion is in a tag team match against 2 wrestlers you'd never expect him in the ring with for a TV match. There is not even a clear main event, although at press time the 2 top matches look to be Orange Cassidy versus Jon Moxley for the international title and Kenny Omega versus Konosuke Takeshita. There is certainly the best chance for a Cassidy title loss here than any match he's been in for months. In fact, I do, because Moxley can elevate the championship to near world title levels. Omega versus Takeshita could be a classic, and it is the biggest match of Takeshita's career. There is a tease of Ricky Starks versus Ricky Steamboat in a strap match. Obviously this tease was originally to lead to Starks versus Punk, but if that's not happening, I can see it be Starks versus Adam Page. Page isn't on the show elsewhere, and there's also been no build for it, but it may be the best solution under the circumstances. Champion MJF will team with Adam Cole to defend the Ring of Honor tag titles against Alex Reynolds and John Silver. I can't even begin to comprehend this match on a pay-per-view. I'm sure it will be entertaining, but the champion should defend on a pay-per-view unless there is a match for him even more valuable than a title match, and this isn't it. Also, there are so many teams that could have been put in that spot, like Aussie Open, Lucha Brothers, Claudio Castagnoli, and Wheeler Yuta, Bucks, and even Matt Taven and Mike Bennett. Other matches announced are FTR and Young Bucks versus Jay White and Juice Robinson and the Gunn Brothers, Luchasaurus versus Darby Allin for the TNT title, Chris Statlander versus Ruby Soho for the TBS title, Miro versus Powerhouse Hobbs, Samoa Joe versus Shane Taylor for the Ring of Honor TV title, and Katsuyori Shibata and Eddie Kingston versus Castagnoli and Yuta. Tony Khan said that if Billie Starks is cleared, she would face Athena for the Ring of Honor women's title on the pre-show. The show will also be broadcast in about 300 movie theaters. Bucks versus Jay White and Juice Robinson and the Gunn Brothers, Luchasaurus versus Darby Allin for the TNT title, Chris Statlander versus Ruby Soho for the TBS title, Miro vs. Powerhouse Hobbs, Samoa Joe vs. Shane Taylor for the Ring of Honor TV title, and Katsuyori Shibata and Eddie Kingston vs. Castagnoli and Yuta. Tony Khan said that if Billie Starkz is cleared, she would face Athena for the Ring of Honor women's title on the pre-show. The show will also be broadcast in about 300 movie theaters. CMLL. The company announced a collaboration with the Denver Broncos. Místico, Atlantis Jr., Templario and Volador Jr. will be in a match at the October 22 Broncos game with the Green Bay Packers in Denver. As part of the exchange, Miles, the mascot of the Broncos, and 5 others will have a match on the September 8 Arena Mexico show. The Big World Grand Prix show on August 18 at Arena Mexico saw Místico win before a crowd of more than 12,000. Místico was the crowd favorite. The Grand Prix was very sports-like, with it coming down to Místico and Hiromu Takahashi, and Místico won clean. The only storyline was a little problem with Rocky Romero and Samurai del Sol, which actually started a few days earlier when Romero accused Samurai of being a spy for the Mexicans. The crowd was really hot and it went 45-47. The order of elimination was Adrian Quest, eliminated by Angel de Oro, del Sol, by Dragon Road Jr., Francesco Akira, by Templario, Angel de Oro, by Takahashi, TJP, by Averno, Templario, by Kushida. Notable that the 2 guys in the anniversary main event, Templario and Angel de Oro, were both out early. Valiant Aki, by Ultimo Guerrero, Averno, by Romero, Ultimo Guerrero, by Kushida, Romero, by Volador Jr., by Kushida, Mascara Dorada, by Kushida, and Kushida, by Místico, which left Místico and Takahashi. Romero attacked and dented the Grand Prix trophy after the match. That ended up very heated because they played it so angle-free for the entire match. Soberano Jr. beat Stuka Jr. in 14:28 in a match said to be very good, with the crowd really hot for Soberano. At the show, reps for NFL Mexico presented Salvador Letteroth III with a plaque in honor of the 90th anniversary of the promotion. Magnus and Ruhido beat Akuma and Espanto Jr. to retain the Mexican national tag titles. They also did the Guadalajara version of the World Grand Prix on August 15, won by Romero. The participants were Atlantis Jr., Verno, Bestia Negra, Dulce Gardenia, Foria Roja, Soberano Jr., Titan, Ultimo Guerrero, Adrian Quest, Valiant Aki, Dark Magic, Francesco Akira, Kushida, Romero, Samurai del Sol and TJP. Romero and Averno were the last, and Romero won with a low blow. Noche de Campeones, Night of Champions, is September 29 at Arena Mexico. This is a show of all title matches where the fans are the matchmakers. There will be a match for the vacant CMLL World Women's title, and the top 2 vote getters are in the match with Scotty, Zuxis, Hera, Stephanie Vaker, Amapola, and Catalina. Mercurio defends the Minis title against Angelito, Minus or Pierrotito. Cavernario Barbaro defends the CMLL Light Heavyweight title against Averno, Dark Panther, or Esfinge. Rey Cometa and Espiritu Negro and Dulce Gardenia defend the Mexican National Trios titles against Sandokan Jr. and Villano Tercero Jr. and El Hijo del Villano Tercero, Apocalipsis and Disturbio and Cholo or Enfermero Jr. and Dr. Caranti Jr. Uno and Dos. Titan defends the CMLL welterweight title against Fugaz, Mascara Dorada or Astral, and Místico defends the World Historic Middleweight title against Dragon Rojo Jr. and Virus and Star Jr. The match with the most votes gets the main event spot. The August 25 Arena Mexico show saw Titan and Hiromu Takahashi and Soberano Jr. beat Místico and Atlantis Jr. and Volador Jr. in the main event, when Soberano used a low blow on Místico to set up a match between the 2. Ultimo Guerrero and Cavernario and Hechicero beat Averno and Euphoria and Mephisto via DQ when Averno unmasked Hechicero. The audience was down here from recent weeks. The August 27 Arena Mexico show was headlined by Místico defending the historic middleweight title against IWGP Junior champion Takahashi. The only possible result was a draw, and they did a double pin. Místico wanted a restart like they did hours earlier at All In. Takahashi refused. Místico then said he wanted to go to Japan and challenge Takahashi for his title. Attendance was normal or a Sunday. The September 1 show is headlined by Místico vs. Soberano Jr., Mascara Dorada and Templario vs. Dragon Rojo Jr. and Titan, and the first block of the Copa Independencia latest tournament, with Blue Panther Jr., Maya Blanca Fugaz, Magnus, Esfinge, Polvora, Audas, Difunto, Futuro, Espanto Jr., Rey Cometa, and Foria Roja. The September 8 show will have the second block in the tournament with Dark Panther, Stigma, Dulce Gardenia, Hombre Bala Jr., Star Black, Max Star, El Hijo del Villano Tercero, Ruhido, Akuma, Zandokan Jr., Coyote, and Crixus. The winners of the two Cibernetico matches will meet for the title on September 15th. Mascara Dorada was out of action this week after testing positive for COVID. Metalik did an interview with Mas Lucha and said he spoke with Salvador Luteroth and the booking team and they agreed to dates for July and August for his return. After the first tour, he was told that they weren't going to be working with him any longer. He said Jose Luis Feliciano, one of the booking team members, told him he could go to work with AAA if he wanted to. When talking about business, he said the Friday night shows do well but said that the other shows are not and that Guadalajara was not like it used to be when he was there years ago. He also said he didn't come back expecting to make money as he charged less than he would in the US. He basically said he made about 1/3 per match in CMLL as he does for his US dates. The Metalik story actually is a larger lesson about CMLL, Mexico politics, and the cycle of life with wrestlers. Lucha expert Rob Bahari wrote a lot about it, saying that it's clear Metalik expected his return to be a bigger deal than it was and he can blame CMLL for his debut being on a loaded-up show where his return was not a focal part of it. But he returned after all this time to Arena Mexico and got the reaction that a mid-carder would get, not that of a returning superstar. There are reasons for that. A lot of the fans who are regulars are new fans and don't know him, or if they do, he's not Mascara Dorada, the great worker from years back, but Metalik, a guy who did nothing in WWE. And the tourists aren't WWE fans and simply wouldn't know him. Another key thing is that WWE taught him the right style is a very different style than they do here, even though he did that style and was one of the best at it. I do agree with him that there are guys doing too much or maybe doing big stuff at the wrong time, which is something you learn about with more time in the ring regarding what to do and when to do it. Metalik said he's talked with the new Mascara Dorada, El Hijo del Vikingo Commander, Titan and Cavernario about their styles and doing too much. My thoughts are that when you have high-tech TV and it's about a personality getting over through interviews and explained stories on television millions watch, rather than here, where it's about live event charisma and a different. Some who don't understand it say no, but the accurate term is different, and in wrestling, the key lesson at all times to understand is what works. In CMLL, it's about appealing to people who are weekly in the same building and tourists who are going for a good show. But he was telling the talent this is the better way to work and it is for WWE but it's not for CMLL. There are a lot of other issues involved, but in Mexico some noted how a guy who got over by being spectacular and was more of a standout in the ring in CMLL, came back and learned WWE style, and since WWE is more successful, and he was taught it by people there, thought he had evolved into something better, while in Mexico the feeling was the opposite. There were also the political issues of doing a show in Atlanta working with Black Taurus and Microman, and CMLL doesn't want its wrestlers they perceive as Mexicans working with guys like that. Even in the US, foreigners have different rules. In his interview he knocked CMLL style and those in CMLL were shocked he'd publicly do that about the style. Some in the company noted that his match with Titan, booked to be a spectacular singles match, on July 28th, was the worst match on the card and pointed to fans whistling, booing, during the match. The feeling is that if he thought his style was better for CMLL, that match should have taught him differently right away. But many were unhappy with the match and his short tour was viewed by most as a huge disappointment. The company is now partnering with Alemark Business Group to promote shows in Oaxaca. CMLL talent will appear in Oaxaca every other Wednesday night. Referee and booker Edgar Noriega of CMLL said there also would be a possibility of the top wrestlers from Oaxaca coming to Arena Mexico. Alemark Business Group is also expected to open a training school in the city. They announced the first show on September 30th with Octagon and Fuerza Guerrera. The plan is to train and promote women wrestlers from Puebla to start on the weekly Monday night shows at Arena Puebla. There is no start date for the 8 women still left in the training program. On the August 29th show at Arena Mexico, the legendary Atlantis vs. Ultimo Guerrero feud was brought back in a singles with Atlantis winning via DQ when Guerrero unmasked him. The main event saw Soberano Jr., as a Rudo, team with his father Euphoria, and Stuka Jr. to beat Místico and Templario, and Titan when Euphoria helped Soberano pin Místico. Místico never loses without a reason and they did challenges after. The August 29th show in Guadalajara saw Reina Isis retain the Mexican national women's title over Valkyria. Angel de Oro and Niebla Roja retained the CMLL tag titles over Volador Jr. and Star Jr. on August 22nd at Arena Mexico. Takahashi worked August 22nd in Guadalajara in the main event, teaming with Averno and Soberano Jr. over Místico and Titan and Dulce Gardenia, which meant Takahashi went against Titan. Both are LIJ members and in pre-match build both said they didn't know why they were facing each other. AAA. Kana noted in an interview with Nick Hausman of House of Wrestling that he had found a kidney donor, which he's been looking for a long time. I'm feeling great, but dialysis is not something you want to be on forever because of two things. Number one, it's your kidneys are only at 10% functionality. That's number one, he noted. And number two, dialysis isn't like, oh, you can be on dialysis forever and live off of it. No, you'll eventually die. So, basically, I have to find a donor. And I have one right now. They just have to do, there's this BMI index. They have to lose 6 pounds, 6 more pounds. And then they can donate their kidney, and we still got to make sure they're compatible. So, I always try to think positively because thinking negatively doesn't help anything. There was a controversy from Triple Mania involving Rush and AAA which got really weird over the past week. Preston Vance and Jose the assistant were in Rush's corner in the main event. From what we were told, they were there because Rush told Dorian Roldan that Tony Khan really wanted them on the show. Roldan isn't going to go against Khan's wishes at this point, obviously, given I think AAA is lucky to still be working with Khan after the Dragon Lee situation where FTR lost the tag titles and the guy who scored the pin then announced he had signed with WWE. I don't know if Roldan called Khan to check it out, but that's what he was told. But the word didn't get to Khan, who wasn't agenting the match but was helping the English announcers, and he never told them about it. Larry Dallas had no idea who the guys were, although Joe Dombrowski did. Hausman reported what was basically an accurate story as to what happened. Jose then on Twitter called his story inaccurate and also got into it with Dallas, although the two later made up. Conan is the booker, but he had nothing to do with the four-way apuestas match with Rush Louisiana Park, Sam Adonis, and Psycho Clown, because he has heat with Park over a number of things, including an incident a long time back. The deal with Park is that he is a draw, and gets the biggest reactions and is a mainstream name, but he does what he wants. Anyway, then Jose got Rush to back him up when Hausman wouldn't retract his story. Hausman was getting lambasted even though his story was largely accurate, especially when he refused to print a retraction even though Rush said differently. Conan then backed up Hausman and said to Hausman on his House of Wrestling show, "Nobody wants to do the truth to get out there. I thought you were pretty spot on with what you were saying because I can tell you this for a fact. I didn't know what was going on, and I'm the booker. You know what I'm saying? I get along with Rush," he continued. "I don't get along with L.A. Park, and that's the reason I didn't book that match." So Dorian booked it, and a lot of stuff wasn't communicated to the people that need to know it because when I saw Jose and Preston Vance get involved, I was like, I wasn't ever told about this. I didn't even know it. I don't know if Rush did it himself or if Dorian told him he could do it, but Dorian told me that wasn't supposed to happen. Then if you notice I think when Rush clapped back at you, he says, because originally, we were all told that Tony Khan wanted them to be involved. But then if you notice Rush put on there, they were there because he wanted him there. And I was like, okay, so what's going on here? Whatever the real story was, whether it was Rush or Khan is never going to publicly go against one of his wrestlers. It was noted that AAA's Triple Mania did 15,853 fans at Arena Ciudad, which was slightly more than WWE did in the same building, which was 15,500. Right now, even though people don't want to admit it, WWE is far more popular than either CMLL or AAA in Mexico, at least based on Google searches. In fact, WWE is far more popular anywhere there is pro wrestling of any substance in the world than any other promotion, except in Japan where New Japan and Stardom are more popular than WWE. The keys to AAA drawing more than WWE are that they charged far lower ticket prices, and also AAA was doing 2-for-1s in the last few days to help fill the building. The next major show is Heroes and Mortals on October 1st in Zapopan, right outside Guadalajara, at the Auditorio Benito Juarez, which is almost a duplicate of the old Sam Houston Coliseum in Houston that was a wrestling hotbed. There will be a Copa Antonio Pena, who the show will honor, semifinal with women with Dulce Canela, Maravilla, Sexy Star, Lady Shani Centella Estrellita, Chick Tormenta and others. There is a three-way with Chessman and Parca Negra, Forastero and Sanson and Dave the Clown and Murder Clown for a future shot at the AAA tag titles. Negro Casas and Dalys vs Abismo Negro and Flammer for the mixed tag titles. El Hijo del Vikingo and Maestezis Jr. vs Drilistico and Bestia del Ring and Octagon Jr. and Pentagon Jr. vs QT Marshall and Sam Adonis as the main event. Harley Cameron from AEW is coming to be in the Marshall and Adonis corner. Marshall is being used because he's very good in the ring, willing to come, and eventually do a major blow-off at some point with Pentagon, with this being part of that long-term program. Marshall retained the Latin American title, beating Chuck Mambo of Sunshine Machine on the August 26th Progress Wrestling show in London. They also run Juan de la Barrera Gym in Mexico City on September 23rd with Vikingo vs. Commander for the AAA Mega title on top, plus Pagano vs. Texano Jr. in an ambulance match, Casas and Dralistico vs. Argenis and Nicho, a four-way with Octagon Jr., Mega Wolf, Drago and Bestia 666 for a shot at Marshall's Latin American title, and Mr. Iguana and Nino Hamburguesa vs. Kento, SB Kento, and Takuma Fujiwara. The appearance of Las Shotas, Jesse Ventura, and Diva Salvaje on the September 1st Crash show indicates they are done here. They haven't done anything with them, so it makes sense. After taking that insane and botched bump at Triple Mania, Pagano was back wrestling after the show. Vampiro's latest is that he wanted to do a retirement show with AAA, but his contract ended and he wasn't offered a new deal. He said he is retired in Mexico but will continue to work for Billy Corgan and the NWA, where he said he has creative control, and will continue to work Japan. Friends of Cuatrero, who is in jail since March due to domestic abuse on then-girlfriend Stephanie Baker, ran a show at the jail he is in, which is weird. Several AAA wrestlers worked the show. They had a TV taping on August 20th in Monterrey at the show center. Nothing special happened as Vampiro and Pagano beat Antifaz del Norte and Chessman in the main event when Alberto El Patron interfered. Vampiro took off the tennis shoes he wore in the ring and left them there with the idea he was retiring. Nobody took that seriously, and AAA hasn't even mentioned it. The Cubs fan, in noting that AAA remains the only major promotion doing live commentary, that they believe the knowledgeable fans hate it but that it helps out the casual fans. They'll return to the show center on November 26th. AAA also announced La Revancha de Triple Mania, Revenge from Triple Mania, on September 23rd at the Juan de la Barrera Gym in Mexico City. It's the first time they've run that building since 2018. That building has been run by a number of other promotions who have died. Octagon Jr. was out of action, breaking 3 toes doing a tornillo to the floor. Marty Scurll returns on an EMW show in Tijuana using AAA talent. Some jumped on AAA for using him, but it was the local promoter who booked him, although Conan does book the EMW shows and also books AAA. Stardom. Reports were raving about the August 15th Stardom show at Haraku and Hall, with the idea the last 3 matches were excellent, and the champion versus champion match with World of Stardom champion Tam Nakano versus IWGP champion Mayu Iwatani, a 15-minute draw, was near match of the year caliber. It was notable that the 2 supposed top belts in the company against each other in the 5-star Grand Prix was not the main event, and instead they went with AZM's upset over Utami Hayashishita as the main event. The match was reported as great as well, with Hayashishita as a great base for AZM's flying and high-speed title. They had another pay-per-view show on August 19th at the Ota Ward Gym in Tokyo called Midsummer Fest 2023. This was built around bringing back legends from the past and drew 1,653 fans. 1. May Sarah won a 3-way over Hanako and Fukujin Death in 4:58 when Sarah cradled Hanako. 2. Hanan and Rina and Hina, the 3 teenage sisters, beat Lady C and Waka Tsukiyama and Yuna Mijimori in 7:04 when Hana pinned Tsukiyama. 3. Mina Shirakawa and Mariah May beat Megan Bain and Thekla in 7:04 when May pinned Thekla. May has improved greatly here and has the look that WWE wants, so she should be on everyone's radar. Fightful reported AEW is looking at her, and those in Stardom are not aware of any deal, but the belief from them is that she will get an offer from AEW and or WWE because of her look and how much she's improved in the ring. Keep in mind the Stardom women's style is very different from WWE and also different from AEW, and not everyone wants the hard-hitting style to the degree they do it here. 4. Maika and Suzu Suzuki beat Emi Sourei and Saya Ida in 9:17 when Maika pinned Ida after a Michinoku driver. 5. Mayu Iwatani and Koguma of Stars beat Siri and Saki Kashima of God's Eye in 9:31 when Iwatani beat Kashima with a Dragon Sleeper. 6. Dump Matsumoto, 62, the best woman heel perhaps of all time and many thought the best heel of the 80s, man or woman, returned to team with Zap Kaoru Ito, a 90s star in Natsuka Tora, and Ruaka to beat Kyoko Inoue, one of the best women wrestlers of all time, and Utami Hayashishita and AZM and Miyu Amasaki in 13:41 when Tora pinned Amasaki with a Death Valley Bomb. 7. Tam Nakano and Natsupoi and Saoru Inu beat Shinobu Kandori, 58, a former star in judo, MMA and pro wrestling, who became a senator in Japan, and Takako Inoue, a 90s star who was pushed as a heartthrob type, and Hazuki in 16:04 when Natsupoi beat Hazuki with Fairy Magic. 8. Jaguar Yokota, 63, the best in-ring woman wrestler of the early 80s in the world, and Nani Takahashi and Momoe Nakanishi, a 90s star, beat Momo Watanabe and Starlight Kid in in 27:02 when Takahashi pinned Kid with the Nanamomo driver. Current 5-star standings are: Red Block, Natsuka Tora 12, Natsupoi 9, Tam Nakano, Siri and Mayu Iwatani 5, Suzu Suzuki, Starlight Kid and Me Sore 4, Hazuki 2 and Saya Kamitani injured with 0. Blue Block has Mina Shirakawa, Momo Watanabe, Mirai, Saori Inu and Mariah May all with 6, Julia and Micah with 5, AZM and Utami Hayashi Shida with 4 and Hanan with 2. August 20th in Numazu before 378 fans saw Red Block matches with Hazuki over Sore in 14:02 with a brainbuster and Tora pinned Iwatani in 13:07 with a Swanton bomb. In theory this could get Tora an IWGP title match later this year. August 26th in Nagoya before 904 fans saw Tora over Nakano in the Red Block and Mirai over Julia and Micah over Hayashi Shida in 3 upsets in the Blue Block. August 27th in Kirameki before 307 saw blue matches with Inu over Hanan and May over Watanabe and Red Block with Sore over Starlight Kid and Tora over Natsupoi. Rina beat Tsukiyama to retain the Future of Stardom title in the main event on August 18th in Shinagawa before a sellout of 361 fans. Dragon Gate. Dangerous Gate 2023 took place on August 20th at the Oda Ward Gym in Tokyo. Results saw: 1. Xi and Big Boss Shimizu and UT beat Dragon Gia and Kaito Nagano and Daiki Yanagaichi in 8:23 when Shimizu pinned Yanagaichi with the Big Boss press. 2. Ultimo Dragon and Naruki Doi and BXB Hulk and Ho-Ho Lun beat Shuji Kondo and Kagetora and Mondai Ryu and punched Tominaga in 7:54 when Dragon pinned Tominaga with a la Magistral Cradle. 3. Ishin retained the Open the Brave Gate title beating Mochizuki Jr. at 11:08 with the Kyokai in a battle of second-generation wrestlers groomed for stardom. 4. Ben-Kei and Yuki Yoshioka and Strong Machine J beat Masaaki Mochizuki and Don Fuji and special guest Tomohiro Ishii in 14:49 when Yoshioka pinned Mochizuki after a frog splash. 5. Yamato beat Fujita Jr. Hayato in 19:05 with a choke. Hayato wrestles for Michinoku Pro and GLEAT and was another special guest on the show. 6. Yasushi Kanda and Susumu Mochizuki retained the Open the Twin Gate titles over Kai and Hyo and Jason Lee and Jackie Funky Kami in an elimination match. Hyo beat Kami to eliminate Kami and Lee first. Mochizuki then beat Hyo in 22:48 with the Mugen 7. Madoka Kikuta retained the Open the Dream Gate title beating Kota Minoura in 28:07 with a rolling lariat. All Japan. Yuji Nagata announced he was finished up here and put over All Japan's younger talent. They have Sumo Hall booked for a November 12th show with Hiromu Takahashi. They ran August 19th at Korakuen Hall before 936 fans for the start of the single elimination Auto tournament where the winner will face Yuma Aoyagi for the Triple Crown. The main event was another classic Kento Miyahara and Yuma Aoyagi retaining the world tag titles over Yuji Nagata and Ryuki Honda in 23:32 with Miyahara pinning Honda with the shutdown suplex. The match was all about making Honda look good and exciting in with the tag champs. The last third of the match with he and Miyahara was great. Not a match of the year candidate but was told an excellent match. First round tournament matches were Dan Tamura over Kotaro Suzuki in 6:59 with a powerbomb in a good fast-paced match. Takuya Nomura beat Hokuto Amori in 10:35 with a dragon suplex in a very good hard-hitting match with a hot crowd for both. Satoshi Kojima beat Rei Saito in 9:41 with a lariat with a tremendous performance from Kojima getting so much out of the larger but limited Saito who does have star potential with his brother because of their size and they have charisma. And Shuji Ishikawa beat Ren Ayabe with a running knee in 14:47. The old Mr. Wrestling 2 finisher. Lots of heat as the crowd liked the hard hitting of the two big power guys. Ayabe is billed at 6'7" but is thin, and was noticeably taller than Ishikawa who is very large. August 20th in Tokyo at Shinkiba before a sellout 322 fans saw Hayato Tamura over Jun Saito in 9:16 with a lariat. Suwama over Fuminori Abe in 24 with a dropkick. Miyahara pinned Atsuki Aoyagi in 12:21 with a shutdown German suplex in a very good match and Miyahara sold a lot in the second half of the match for him. And Honda beat champion Yuma Aoyagi in 14:38 with a final vent. That's huge as Honda is 23 years old and he knocked the champion out of the tournament in the first round. This match was reported as excellent, hard-hitting with great crowd heat. The crowd went nuts for Honda scoring the upset. August 21st in Shinkiba before a sellout of 325 fans. In second-round matches, Suwama pinned Tamura in 9:17 with a choke, Kojima beat Nomura in 9:17 in a very good all-action match that probably needed a few more minutes. Nomura played a cocky heel. Ishikawa beat Tamura in 14:21 with a razor's wedge. Great match. Super performance from Tamura. The crowd loved this and Ishikawa sold a lot. Honda continued his streak, knocking Miyahara out of the tournament in 16:57 in another excellent match with great heat. Honda's victory came across like a career-defining moment. Kojima beat Honda in 17 minutes with a lariat on August 27 in Nagoya before 921 fans to win the tournament. September 3 in Nagaoka has Yuma Aoyagi defending against Kojima plus Hiromu Takahashi vs Rising Hayato, Kento Miyahara vs Hokuto Omori and Ryuki Honda vs Atsuki Aoyagi, plus there is a double trios title match with both the All Japan and KOD, DDT, titles at stake with DDT's Yukio Sakaguchi and Saki Akai and Hideki Okatani defending against ATM and Dash Kishako and Black Mensori. Miyahara has 15th anniversary match on September 8 at Tokyo National Stadium against Yuma Anzai. Jun Akiyama and Sanshiro Takagi and Yusuke Okada of DDT face Suwama and Hikaru Sato and Dan Tamura, plus Kairi and Saoru Inu face Unagi Sayaka and Sori. Pro Wrestling Noah. Go Shiozaki said that he had gone to police regarding a stalker. He said that police and the promotion are involved, saying that the stalker has threatened not only himself but also his family. Yoshiki Inamura said he was going on an excursion around the world, starting with the UK. It's a little strange since he's a 5-year veteran and that's usually late for talent to go on excursion, and he's 30 years old. The N1 final standings saw the A block with Keno and Jake Lee both 7-3 and Keno advancing via his win over Lee on August 27 in Kawasaki before 1,694 fans. Jack Morris was 4-2-1, Yuki Yoshioka and Timothy Thatcher were 4-3, Masa Kitamiya was 3-3-1, Adam Brooks was 2-5 and Inamura was 0-7. The B block saw Shiozaki and Manabu Soya at 4-2-1, but Shiozaki pinned Soya in 22-33 with a lariat in Kawasaki. Katsuhiko Nakajima, Lance Anawai and El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. were 4-3, Saxon Huxley was 3-4 and Yuma Anzai and Inaba were 2-5. In Kawasaki, Soya beat Wagner to advance to the final match and Shiozaki beat Nakajima. The Keno vs Shiozaki championship match is September 3 in Osaka. That includes Kaito Kiyomiya and Ryohei Oiwa vs Zack Sabre Jr. and Yoshinari Ogawa. Sabre and Ogawa were a regular team here before Sabre became a big star in New Japan. Masakatsu Funaki vs Josh Barnett, Chris Ridgway and Doga defend the GHC Junior Tag titles against Atsushi Kodoji and High 69 in Inamura's last match before excursion with Namichi Marufuji and Takashi Sugiura and Kitamiya vs Inamura and Yoshioka and Anzai. From the tournament, I've gotten praise on Morris, Anzai and Wagner as people to watch. Anzai had great matches with Nakajima and Wagner and is exceptional for his level of experience and is getting a decent push. Wagner has been a major breakthrough as a somewhat unknown guy on an international basis who came to Noah, and they've made him one of their foreign stars. New Japan. Bushiroad CEO Takaki Kadani noted that they are looking at expanding both New Japan and Stardom into Southeast Asia. A correction from a few months ago. We had written that the reason Desperado was doing so many indie dates was because he was working as a freelancer, similar to Minoru Suzuki. Desperado said that was not the case and he is under contract here, so we apologize for this mistake. Tetsuya Naito this past week said, "I definitely feel I have a lot further to go, yet at the same time, I know my time is limited. I have knee troubles, eye troubles." The end of the line, that image of retirement that was so far away for so long, is now coming into focus. The best of the Super Junior Tag Team Tournament starts October 21 in Saitama with the finals on the Power Struggle Show on November 4 in Osaka at the Edion Arena. The All-Star Junior Festival took place on August 19 at the 2,300 Arena in Philadelphia before 672 fans, so they didn't sell out the small building. They used junior heavyweight talent from New Japan, AEW Dragon Gate, Impact, GCW, CMLL, AEW and DDT. Results were, 1. Goldie beat Vinny Pacifico in 8:20 with a springboard knee. 2. Matt Seidel and Yo beat Shun Skywalker and Bushi in 8:55 when Yo beat Bushi with a 5-star clutch. 3. In the semifinals of a 4-man one-night tournament, Kevin Knight upset Clark Connors in 9:58 with a crucifix. 4. In the other semifinal, Mike Bailey beat Francesco Akira in 13:31 with the Flamingo Driver. 5. Ryusuke Taguchi and Rich Swann in the DKC beat Real One, formerly Enzo Amore, making his New Japan debut, although he did a run-in at the New Japan show in Madison Square Garden in 2019 through Ring of Honor since New Japan knew nothing of it, and Jack Cartwheel and Starboy Charlie. The finish saw Swan pin Charlie after a 450 splash. 6. Alex Shelley and Chris Bay and Robbie Eagles and Kosei Fujita beat Yoshinobu Kanemaru and TJP and Ace Austin in Cheeseburger in 17 minutes when Fujita pinned Cheeseburger with a German suplex. It shows how New Japan values Fujita, with him scoring the win here, and also put regular tag team Austin and Bay on opposite sides. 7. Soberano Jr. won a 5-way match over Fugaz, Dragon Kid, Leo Rush and Casey Navarro in 7:15 when Soberano used the Soberano driver to pin Navarro. 8. Desperado and Mao beat Nick Wayne and Jordan Oliver, who are a regular tag team in GCW, when Desperado pinned Oliver after the Pinche Loco. 9. The 3-way Philly cheesesteak ladder match saw Doki and independent wrestler Low Rider as the major upset winners over Hiromu Takahashi and Rock Romero and Master Wato and Blake Christian in 1927 when Doki pulled down the cheesesteak. 10. Bailey pinned Knight in 1953 to win the tournament with the Flamingo driver. The show ended up Bailey challenging Hiromu Takahashi to an IWGP Junior title match and Takahashi accepting. The match will be a 3-way on the October 9th Sumo Hall show with Takahashi vs. Leo Rush vs. Bailey. Rush was added to the match when he pinned Takahashi in a tag match the next night in Philadelphia on the joint show with Impact. They've added a November 10th date in Garland, Texas at the Curtis Culwell Center. Some more notes on the next tour of Japan, which begins September 8th at Korakuen Hall. They have added a best-of-7 trio series with Yuji Nagata and Shota Umino and Master Wato against the strong-style trio of Minoru Suzu and Ren Narita and Desperado. The matches are September 10th in Togane, September 17th in Fukuoka, September 25th in Nagoya, September 30th at Korakuen Hall, October 1st at Korakuen Hall, October 7th in Miyagi, and the final match will be on the October 9th Sumo Hall show called Instruction in Ryogoku, which is the next major show on the schedule in Japan. Other Japan notes. DDT runs the Ota War Gym in Tokyo on September 9th with Chris Brooks defending the KOD title against Shigehiro Irie, Kazuki Hirata, the Extreme Champ, and Naruki Doi, the Iron Man Champ, have a double title match, and Yuji Hino and Makoto Oishi defend the tag titles against Minoru Fujita and Kanon. I don't know if this will be in next year's book or not, but they were promoting the August 20th Oz Academy show at Korakuen Hall around the idea that Jaguar Yokota 63 and Mayumi Ozaki 54 were now recognized by the Guinness Book of World Records as being the oldest women's tag team champions in history. Yokota and Ozaki actually won the titles from Sonoko Kato and Ryo Mizunami on April 23 at Korakuen Hall. That was pushed with the idea they would be the oldest women's tag team in history to defend those titles when they beat Kohaku and Riko Kaji on August 20th at Korakuen Hall before 728 fans. Oz Academy is running a major show on October 22nd at the Yokohama Budokan, headlined by Akino defending her Oz Academy title against Takumi Iroha. People were raving about the Sari over Arisa Nakajima match on the August 25th Seedling show at Korakuen Hall. Jun Kasai had a 25th anniversary mock beating Masashi Takeda on his Freedoms show on August 28th at Korakuen Hall before 982 fans. The match featured all the weapons like broken glass and light tubes. Here and there. Carlos Elizondo, major Mexican promoter out of Monterrey, passed away on August 24th. He brought a lot of Americans to Monterrey, including John Layfield and Chris Jericho, before Jericho became a national star there with EMLL. His heyday was in the 80s and 90s, including promoting the Blue Demon vs. Rayo de Jalisco Mask vs. Mask match and the El Solitario vs. Dr. Wagner Mask vs. Mask match, which were two of the biggest matches in the history of Mexican wrestling. By the time you are reading this, the announcement of the new company featuring Japanese women wrestlers we've been writing about will be announced, likely with the debut show in September in New York and perhaps many of the names involved. It will be announced with a hybrid anime live-action trailer with the idea of appealing to wrestling fans as well as those outside of wrestling. The first event will be in less than 3 weeks after the announcement of the company. The claim is that they are going to have some of the best in ring wrestling in the world and also have a totally new way of doing things. The second Joyce Grable, real name Betty Wade Murphy, 70, has a serious health issue and has been hospitalized. She wrestled from 1971 to 1991 as a regular part of Moolah's stable before retiring after back surgery. She took the name Joyce Grable to honor her trainer and childhood hero, Judy Grable, Nelia Bowman. This Joyce Grable was the second one, as Joyce Fowler, who wrestled from 1963 to 1974, under that name was the original. Moolah gave Murphy the name because she thought she resembled the first Joyce Grable. All of the Grables got their name was Betty Grable, the 1940s beauty queen, movie star and pin-up girl. This Joyce Grable from Georgia held the women's tag team titles in the 70s with both Wendy Richter and Vicki Williams. Netflix will be doing a docu-series called Wrestlers, which will be a reality show based on aspiring wrestlers at Al Snow's OVW promotion in Louisville. The show will debut on September 13th. Netflix is promoting the debut pretty strong, and they are pushing OVW as the place John Cena, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton and Dave Bautista all started, although that was 2 decades ago and they haven't turned out anyone at close to that level since WWE cut ties with them. Bautista and Jason Momoa will be doing another buddy action movie called The Wrecking Crew. EC3 beat Tyrus in a loser must retire bull rope match on the NWA's 75th anniversary show in St. Louis. Tyrus reiterated after in a Slam Wrestling interview that at 50, he believed it was time to retire. He said Billy Corgan wanted to expand the NWA schedule with more dates and he didn't want that schedule and the champion needed to be working more often. Nora Greenwald, 46, the former Molly Holly, is planning on doing the New York City Marathon on November 5th to raise money for cancer research and the V Foundation. Her goal is to raise $6,000 and to finish the race in less than 5 hours and 30 minutes. She noted that her mother is a cancer survivor and her hero, and she wanted to do her part. Kimberly Frankel, the former Kimberly, who announced her retirement in early May, is charged with a DUI, resisting arrest and violence and battery on a law enforcement officer from an incident on May 11th. Frankel, who was with WWE until being cut, and at one point was married to Zachary Wentz and in a sense cost him his job with WWE by making allegations against him and later posting a photo of Wentz from many years earlier where he was dressed up to look like Hitler, was stopped in Sebring, Florida. An officer following her noted her driving erratically and almost driving into a barricade. The police report described Frankel as having bloodshot watery eyes and slurred speech. She kept forgetting when told why she was pulled over. The officer said Frankel kept trying to leave the area and said she needed to get her laundry from the laundromat. When the officer tried to handcuff her, he claimed that she struck him in the chest. He got her handcuffed in one arm and then said before he could get her other arm handcuffed that Frankel began kicking him in the chest and face, busting his lip and his mouth. 5 hours after the incident she blew in 0.14, nearly twice the legal limit, and refused a second test. She pleaded not guilty to the charges. Legendary NFL writer Peter King wrote a piece about Brian Pillman this week. He said this week, "At the end of my camp trip in my 40th season covering the NFL, I look back at my first summer doing it, 1984. That year, covering the Bengals for the Cincinnati Enquirer, I'll never forget training camp in dusty, Burling, Wilmington, Ohio, an hour northeast of Cincinnati, living in the team dorm down the hall from Coach Sam Weich and President Mike Brown. One of my assignments that summer was writing a diary of a long-shot, undersized free agent linebacker Brian Pillman, a college teammate of John Harbaugh at Miami of Ohio. Wrestling fans may remember the late Pillman as Flying Brian, but in 1984, that was neither here nor there. He was doing everything he could to make his hometown Bengala. And he had a problem with one veteran on the team. He then talked about how Pillman was way too small to be an NFL linebacker, so in his locker his mother made him cold cuts and cheeseburgers to put on weight. But Larry Kinnebrew, who was a star on the team, kept stealing them from him. Pillman found out, but Kinnebrew was a star and he was trying to make the team, so he didn't do anything about it. Pillman ended up making the team due to the fact he looked so good in training camp that they decided against cutting him, but he was not even considered a roster candidate when camp started. He played special teams and got hurt. He was traded to the Bills for the next season, and the story was that he was going to make that team, but one of the coaches found steroids in his locker and he was cut. On the August 18th House of Glory show, it was billed as Matt Cardona defending the Hog title against Hiroshi Tanahashi. During the match, Cardona said that it was not a title match due to the commissioner not being there. Tanahashi then beat him. El Hijo del Vikingo works for House of Glory on September 15th in Jamaica, Queens, New York at the NYC Arena. Also on that show we'll have Matt Raywolt, the former Aiden English, coming out of retirement to team with former partner Simon Gotch to become a regular team in the promotion. The two were known as the Vaudevillains in NXT and WWE. Kento, formerly SB Kento, and Takuma Fujiwara, the two former Dragon Gate guys that were expected to be two of the company's biggest stars for decades, but were fired for reasons having to do with Japan's still hard line on marijuana usage getting out, won the tag team titles for the DTU promotion in Tulancingo, Mexico on August 17th. Juan Antonio Reyes Alcudia, 74, who wrestled as Meizo 2 in Tabasco, passed away on August 7th. He wrestled from the 60s through the 80s in that area. Simon Antonio, 30, wrestled out of Veracruz as Aguila Imperial Jr., passed away after being the victim of a hit and run. Alfredo Alatorre, who referees in Monterrey, Mexico, passed away on August 26. He also wrestled as Kalani. Europe. Progress Wrestling announced that its co-owners, Lee McAteer and Martin Best, have completed a significant U.S. investment deal from International Exchanges of North America, IENA. The plan is to grow the promotion and in particular their streaming service Demand Progress Plus. The goals are to run North America more and have an office in New York. IENA is supposed to help get visas for their talent and open the door for their talent to work indies in the U.S. and Progress also coming down the line. Atlantis Jr., Hechicero, Magia Blanca, Audas, Capitan Suicida, Sangre Imperial, Zando Khan Jr., Guerrero Maya Jr., Titan, Ultimo Guerrero and Okamura will be appearing on the September 23 Fantastica Mania show put on by Rev Pro. Atlantis Jr. was also announced for the September 24 Rev Pro show in St. Neots. Impact. Skyway Studios of Nashville, where they do production, is scheduled for major upgrades. Because of that, they'll be cutting back on tapings after Bound for Glory in October. Instead of doing regular TV tapings, they will be taping all 4 shows in the UK in October for a lot of television shows, as well as November will be built also around a joint show with AAA. Final resolution will be December 11th at Santino Morella's Battle Arts Gym in Mississauga. ONT they also said Hard to Kill. The annual January pay-per-view will be from a new location on the Las Vegas Strip and not Sam's Town, believed to be at the Palms Hotel's Pearl Arena, which is a cool building that UFC used to run. Awesome Kong and Gail Kim will both be coming out of retirement to wrestle on the company 1000th episode of Impact on September 9th. The match will be Kong and Kim and returning Jordan Grace and Trinity and a mystery partner against Angelina Love and Deonna Purrazzo and Savannah Evans and Giselle Shaw and a mystery partner. The Dudleys also return as a tag team and Angelina Love and Velvet Sky reunite. Alex Shelley defends the Impact title against Trey Miguel. Will Ospreay will wrestle at Bound for Glory on October 21st in Chicago. He's also booked for the Turning Point show on October 27th in Newcastle, UK. The September 8th Victory Road show from White Plains, New York, has Tommy Dreamer, who is from the White Plains area, Yonkers, putting up his career for a digital media title match against Kenny King, Trinity vs. Alicia Edwards for the Knockouts title, Purrazzo vs. Grace, Leo Rush vs. Kushida for the X title, Zachary Wentz and Trey Miguel defend the tag titles against Chris Sabin and Shelley, Bully Ray vs. PCO and Josh Alexander vs. Steve Macklin. The joint show with New Japan and AEW on August 20th in Philadelphia at the 2,300 arena drew 665 paid, so they failed to sell out this show at the small building as well, even with Julia's US debut. 1. Heath and Joe Hendry and Yuya Uemura beat Rocky Romero and Ryusuke Taguchi and Master Wato in 10:19. While wrestled, the key to the match was getting Uemura over and he pinned Taguchi with a flying body press off the top rope. That's considered a big win by Japan standards when a guy on excursion beats a veteran star before his return to Japan. 2. Kenny King beat Yoshinobu Kanemaru in 6:56 to retain the digital media title using the Royal Flush. Kanemaru did his whiskey-spitting gimmick. A lot of the live crowd didn't seem to know Kanemaru or at least didn't react much to him, but he's a solid worker. 3. Chris Sabin won an 8-man match over Rich Swann, Yo, Frankie Kazarian, Bushi, Kevin Knight, El Desperado and Mao from DDT in 8:01. The finish saw Sabin pin Yo with a cradle shock. They didn't have much time, so it was an all-action super fast-paced sprint. Mao got over big to the live crowd. Bushi blew mist in Sabin's face after the match. 4. Moose and Eddie Edwards beat Zack Sabre Jr. and Shane Haste in 13:22 when Moose pinned Haste after a spear. Said to be really good. 5. Julia made her US debut and retained the New Japan Strong Women's title in a 4-way over Momo Kogo, Deonna Purrazzo and Giselle Shaw in 12:22 when Julia pinned Shaw with a Northern Lights bomb. This was a surprise because one would have figured Kogo, a good worker who isn't pushed hard in Stardom, was brought in to do the job. People reacted to Julia from the start as a superstar. It did seem to indicate bringing her win didn't sell any extra tickets. People attend more for companies than individuals because I believe a Stardom show in this building would sell out instantly. 6. Sami Callihan beat Doki in a South Philadelphia street fight in 12:46. The match was not advertised as a street fight, but Callihan challenged him to a street fight at the start and he agreed. Callihan used a Cactus Jack piledriver for the win. Doki kicked out of several hard weapons shots and got the crowd into him. 7. Francesco Akira and TJP beat Robbie Eagles and Kosei Fujita in 11:32. Said to be well wrestled. The finish saw Eagles accidentally superkick Fujita and TJP pinned Fujita, 8. David Finlay and Kenna and Chris Bay and Ace Austin and Alex Colin and Clark Connors of Bullet Club beat Josh Alexander and Tama Tonga and Tangaloa and PCO and El Fantasmo and the DKC in 14:09. Basically one big spot after another ending when Finlay powerbombed DKC, 9. Leo Rush and Trey Miguel beat Hiromu Takahashi and Mike Bailey in 14:28. The key to the match was Rush pinning Takahashi using a low blow to set up the finish to get into a three-way at Sumo Hall, which also includes Bailey for the IWGP Junior title on October 9th. The match was a showcase for Rush, and with the talent involved you were going to have a top-level match. 10. Alex Shelley retained the Impact title over Hiroshi Tanahashi in 1852, winning clean with shell shock. Tanahashi seems to now be the New Japan star who has a big name and can lose in title matches to people from other companies to where it's a big win for them. But again, this show not selling out indicates people are wise to the game, and Tanahashi means a lot less in his new role than years ago. Nobody expected Tanahashi to win, and while it was good wrestling, it was said Tanahashi's limitations were more obvious here than in the G1, but still quality wrestling. The story here is that Shelley used all kinds of finishers from New Japan stars that Tanahashi kicked out of, with the idea he had scouted people who beat Tanahashi. Impact held their Emergence pay-per-view on August 27th in Toronto. Miguel and Zachary Wentz beat Flash Morgan Webster and Mark Andrews to win the tag titles. Steve Macklin started a feud with Josh Alexander. Trinity beat Deonna Purrazzo via submission to keep the Knockouts title. AEW. Tony Khan was on CNBC promoting the Wembley Stadium show. He certainly hinted that Max was going to be a partner. He pushed that Max was his favorite streaming service and that WBD had exclusive streaming rights for AEW in the US, and also noted Max was available internationally. Max starts streaming live sports in October, but there has been no word if Max will have pay-per-view capabilities like ESPN Plus or New Japan World. Obviously people would like the idea of pay-per-views on Max for the monthly subscription price and not as a pay-per-view, but that would depend on Max's financial commitment. Khan himself recently also hinted at doing more pay-per-view shows, noting that historically every company that expanded the number of pay-per-view shows they did in a year never regretted the decision. Khan also brought up the idea of Max and noted the differences in how UFC and WWE handle their streaming pay-per-view business. When asked about the Fight Forever video game, he said, "The game has been a very successful launch. We've made great revenues back. Also, we'll have Stadium Stampede mode coming soon to Fight Forever. Video games themselves usually don't release financial numbers. The only stuff on the WWE games is when listed as part of the licensing category in their quarterly summaries, and they don't break it down in specific. But there was nothing going around within the industry of the game doing well or not doing well, past the belief that its reviews were going to limit its late sales to the wrestling fan audience, and most would buy early, and not cross over into the video game audience that would buy later if a game gets great reviews." Khan also pushed the idea that they were number one in the UK, which was the second biggest wrestling market. His argument is that their show beat what WWE's biggest shows in the market have done, and that their TV shows get more viewers. Normally those would be the metrics, but WWE is so far ahead on Google searches, and the AEW television is on such a better station as far as garnering more viewers that we all knew they would draw more viewers on television. You don't want to downplay anything because the Wembley crowd was unbelievable, but it was also the first time in the market, and if WWE came to the UK once every 4 years and did a pay-per-view show in the market, they do awesome business as well. It's about the long term, and the 80,315 at Wembley is a once-in-a-lifetime thing. There was a significant period where AEW was beating WWE in both New York and Chicago when it came to live attendance, and that certainly isn't the case now. Khan did a press call on August 31st. He indicated the next Ring of Honor pay-per-view would be Final Battle in December without saying that exactly. He said that when he is cleared, they are very interested in her. We do know from people who saw her this weekend that her foot was in a full cast still, and when she was at the airport in London, she had someone wheeling her around in a wheelchair. As noted, she and those close to her have tried to keep quiet about the severity of her injury, her surgery and her recovery timetable, although she has been in talks with AEW and did fly to this show and went to shows to see Trinity in Impact as well. Khan said that he tried to get a bundled deal for people to order both the All Out and All In show together at a discounted price, and said it would have made a lot of sense. But he said the carriers couldn't pull it off, and said it's almost impossible to get all of the carriers and streaming platforms to agree on similar terms for a bundle. Khan called Terry Funk the greatest of all time. He said he never met Funk. He said Tommy Dreamer tried to put them together but it never happened. He made a comparison to Michael Jordan. He did an interview recently and was asked if something happened to him, who would run the company. He said he's told his father that if he was hit by a truck or somehow became incapacitated that the person to run the company should be Bryan Danielson. He said all in changed the perception of the company and they would be airing clips of the show all year on TV. The Collision tapings on September 2nd from the United Center in Chicago, which were originally going to feature CM Punk, is now scheduled as Saraya and Toni Storm and Ruby Soho vs. Hikaru Shida and Britt Baker and Chris Statlander, Jay White vs. Dax Harwood, The Acclaimed and Billy Gunn defending the trio's titles against Matt Menard and Angelo Parker and Daniel Garcia, and an angle involving Ricky Starks and Ricky Steamboat which is teasing a strap match between the two of them. They will be doing an 8-man tournament for a shot at MJF's title which will take place on the September 20th Dynamite show from Arthur Ashe Stadium. The tournament starts at the September 6th Dynamite show in Indianapolis. On that show they are also starting the build for an FTR vs. Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara tag team title match. CM Punk was honored with the Mike Mazurki Award at the Cauliflower Alley Club banquet on August 30th in Las Vegas. He did a 45-minute speech on his life and career. When people tell me that they don't like me or that the internet is mad at me, I just chuckle because Roddy Piper liked me, Dusty Rhodes liked me and Harley Race liked me. And that means more than anything else in the world because these legends put their stamp on me before anyone else did. It gave me the confidence and it gave me the ability to succeed. He credited John Layfield, Eddie Guerrero, Raven, Tracy Smothers, AJ Mendez, Mickie James and Ace Steel among others. Also awarded at the banquet were Ron Simmons for the Luthez Award, Damien 666 as the Lucha Libre Award winner, Mickie James as Women's Honoree, Coco Ware and reporter Koji Miyamoto got the James C. Melby Historian Award and came from Japan, Kevin Jeffries as the Charlie Smith Referee Award winner, the Nasty Boys as tag team winners, as well as Joe Malenko, Killer Carl Cox and independent wrestler Rhea Von Slasher. Bandito has the cast off his wrist so he should be back soon. He got the pin taken out 2 weeks ago and September was originally when he was expected to return. The latest UK ratings are the August 8th Rampage, which was the parking lot brawl show, did 147,000 viewers at 11:15 p.m., which is a fantastic number. It was the best number for Rampage since February 20th and that was in a better time slot, and before that you have to go back to October. Collision on August 9th did 87,000 at 12:30 a.m., which is good considering the show aired 12:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. Dynamite on August 11th did 94,000 viewers at 11 p.m., which is the lowest the show did in several weeks but also started 2 hours later than the usual start time. August 15th Rampage did 95,000 with an 11:50 p.m. start. August 16th Collision did 96,000 with a 12:15 a.m. start. August 18th Dynamite did 135,000 with a 9 p.m. start. With TSN Plus being moved from a free streaming service in Canada for those who already get TSN to an $8 per month paid service, and with Rampage and Collision only on TSN Plus, this will greatly cut down on what was already a limited audience for those shows. I know of many in Canada upset because it's $8 per month to get TSN in the first place, and that used to include the streaming, and now that has been doubled if you want to watch Collision and Rampage, which are rarely on television, usually limited to when they air from a city in Canada. The TSN Plus app also allowed you to watch older episodes on demand, so that's another thing that was free taken away. Not sure if this is AEW related, but Keiji Muto is flying to Chicago for this week. Adam Cole was awarded the Culture City Human Highlight Award Person of the Year. Culture City has worked with AEW since very early in the company's history. It is a non-profit organization which trains staff at venues and then certifies venues which have sensory-inclusive modifications. The organization also provides applications for Apple and Android devices which list sensory-friendly venues to assist those with sensory processing disorders. Conan's interview with House of Wrestling discussed the split of Santana and Ortiz that took place last year. Ortiz hasn't been used much but is fine and Santana is about to return. I definitely talked to both of them to try to make them mend fences. Ortiz was definitely down to talk. Santana is kind of like me when I was young, he's kind of a hothead, you know? And so he was really adamant that Ortiz didn't kind of stand by him when he thought he should have, and that's a lot of bad feelings. I'm like, bro, this is, you know, Ortiz is cool, he's not a bad guy. He's kind of a go with the flow type of guy, whereas Santana is very, like, they're not doing nothing with us. They need to do something with us, and Ortiz says, yeah, just chill. So, I think that was kind of the crux of their problem. I do believe that they'll talk, and there's a good chance they'll put them together. But Santana is of the mindset, and I agree with him 100% where a lot of people are in AEW. It's like, bro, even though you're paying me, my stock is never going to go up if you don't use me, and you only have a small window of opportunity, as you know. So, from what Santana told me, not getting too much into details, his whole thing was I'm going to talk with Tony, and if they're not going to do anything with me, then I have a decision to make, you know what I'm saying? But we're talking about half the roster feels that way. A few notes from the August 18th Rampage show. Rey Fénix over Commander was super. I had it 4 stars half. Fénix was the perfect guy to make Commander shine with his unique moves. Commander did a flip dive, an incredible springboard into a Canadian destroyer and a rope walk moonsault. He missed a 450 and Fénix used a Fénix driver on him, but he kicked out. Fénix won with a muscle buster. They did a segment showing highlights of QT Marshall from Mexico and announced that he had won the Latin American title at Triple Mania. Notes from the August 19th Collision tapings in Lexington, Kentucky. The show drew 3,228 at Rupp Arena, which is a 23,500-seat college basketball arena. For Ring of Honor, they had Zack Sabre Jr. over Metalik to retain the NJPW TV title. Athena and Billy Starks as babyfaces beat Charlotte and Robin Renegade. Cole Carter won a squash. Carter was managed by Maria Kanellis. Kiera Hogan beat Lady Frost. Lee Moriarty and J.D. Drake and Anthony Henry won a trios match. 2 members of the Spanish Announce Project beat the Outrunners. Layla Hirsch beat Layla Gray. Brian Cage and Bishop Quan and Toa Leona beat Action Andretti and Darius Martin and Lee Johnson. It opened with a brawl between a masked Golden Vampire and Samoa Joe. Vampire shoved down the ref. I think many recognized it as CM Punk right way, but when he did a trademark running knee, the crowd popped for that move. Punk hit a GTS. It was sloppy, but Joe is a really heavy guy these days. He then unmasked. This one worked because everyone cheered him when he unmasked. Punk then accepted the challenge for Wembley Stadium for the match with Joe. They did a video feature on the original All In, and credited the show to the Young Bucks and Cody Rhodes and showed them together. Jay White beat Dalton Castle in 12:06. Juice Robinson and the Gunn brothers were interfering. Bullet Club Gold surrounded Castle on the floor and the boys took out the Guns and Robinson with topes. White and Castle got out of each other's finishes until White won with a choke suplex and Blade Runner. Tony Schiavone interviewed Bullet Club Gold. White said that Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks have deceived you that they were the peak of Bullet Club. He said they would show that Bullet Club Gold is a cut above the elite. Juice Robinson said it took us 2 minutes to put Omega in the hospital. Then Austin Gunn issued an open challenge. Jeff Jameson and the Iron Savages came out. Robinson and Guns beat Jameson and Savages in 9:33. I will say the Savages did their best to maximize their time. It's so hard now because the one thing about the old WCW fan base is that if they didn't know who the people were and you gave them a good performance, the crowd would react. WWF was always reacting to stars, and if guys who were great but people didn't know them did great stuff, the people wouldn't care. It felt like people saw them as enhancement guys. Boulder did a double end of days with both Guns and a splash on all 3. Fans did start getting into Boulder. Robinson pinned Jameson with a DDT. The crowd didn't react much to the finish. The House of Black did another interview on Billy Gunn. Rush called Jose and told him he wanted a stable of badasses. The main thing is that Rush is on his way back. They showed Preston Vance and Dralistico in Mexico drinking. Then some masked guys kidnapped Vance and Dralistico, and then it said, to be continued. This came across like a bad NXT or Impact segment. Ricky Starks was interviewed by Schiavone. Schiavone said he made a mistake last week and that Starks was suspended 28 days, not 30 days. The difference in Starks can be an All Out. Starks made a line that AEW is a non-profit organization, which is funny. Starks is now managing Big Bill, so they are going to try to do something with Bill. Bill beat Derek Neal with a choke slam in 109. There was a segment where they said Darby Allin and Sting went to our Fox's wrestling school to get revenge on him. They were actually at a small indie event as there were a bunch of fans there. They took out Fox as revenge for Nick Wayne. Willow Nightingale pinned Diamante in 11:01 with the Dr. Bomb. Mercedes Martinez came out and then Chris Statlander attacked Martinez and suplexed Martinez on the ramp. The crowd got into this in the last few minutes. Diamante was good, but the crowd didn't see her as a star. Martinez said that they weren't done yet. There was an FTR Young Bucks video package voiced over by FTR. They talked about the Wembley match being for their legacy, that it was the most important match of their career and it determining the greatest tag team of all time. Lexi Nair was with Toni Storm and her ever-changing hairstyle. Storm said she would become the first three-time AEW champion. Powerhouse Hobbs beat Kevin Koo in 158 with the spinebuster. Fans were cheering Koo like crazy. After the match, Hobbs put Koo in the camel clutch. Miro was on the screen saying how he was now godless, but that Hobbs isn't, because Hobbs will be praying to him. Darby Allin beat Christian in 2032 in a 4 1/4 stars match. Christian worked the match in his turtleneck and was the real ring general here. They showed Strickland and Fox watching. Allin did a coffin drop to the floor on Luchasaurus, who caught Allin. Allin did a missile drop kick off the top rope to the floor on Christian, who was sitting in a chair. That looked incredible, but that landing by Allin on his back from the top rope didn't look healthy. Allin missed a coffin drop off the top rope to the apron when Luchasaurus pulled Christian out of the way. He had already pulled him before Allin jumped off, so the jumping felt silly. Christian hit the spear, but Allin kicked out and won with a cradle. The crowd was going wild the last few minutes. Luchasaurus was booted out when he interfered. Luchasaurus came out after the match and they were beating on Allin. Luchasaurus chokeslammed Allin and they threatened Schiavone, who then counted 3, and Schiavone announced Christian as still TNT champion. This was good heel stuff. Then they taped Rampage for August 25th. QT Marshall, billed as the Latin American champion, beat Gravity. Orange Cassidy retained the international title over Aaron Solo. Serpentico beat Truth Magnum. Luchasaurus won a squash match. Saraya and Toni Storm beat Britt Baker and Hikaru Shida. The combined August 23rd tapings of Collision and Dynamite drew 5,343 in Duluth, Georgia. Notes from the August 30th Dynamite show. The show drew 3,746 to the Now Arena for the first of the 3 shows in the market. There was a lot of late discounting to even get to that number. The show was put together at the last minute. Both Saraya and Swerve Strickland had segments that were scrapped due to what was called a minor illness. It was never said this was COVID, but a number of people that went to England that were fans and some talents came back with it, but not serious. A lot of the Florida crew couldn't come due to the hurricane. Chris Jericho barely was able to make it. Kenny Omega was supposed to do something to build the Kanes-Takeshita match, but he wasn't able to get out of Florida. Before Dynamite was a match with Stu Grayson over Robert Anthony in 6:45. Grayson had Dutch and Vincent in his corner. Anthony was over to the fans there because he's a longtime area indie guy. Grayson won with a backbreaker. For Dynamite, Jon Moxley beat Commander in 8:42. Basic good match. Commander did a few cool spots, including a rope walk 450, where Moxley got his knees up. Moxley had a choke, and when Commander didn't tap, changed to an armbar for the tap. When Commander came up, they flashed his win/loss record as 1-7. Even as talented as he is, when people see that, they aren't taking him seriously against Moxley or anyone. Orange Cassidy did a promo. They showed a tape from London where the Young Bucks were down about losing and FTR came into their dressing room and confronted them about not shaking their hands. The Young Bucks apologized and said that they created this show all in and lost. Cash Wheeler said, "We just wanted to show you respect." At this point, Juice Robinson and Jay White and the Guns came out and said this dressing room was only for winners tonight and the Bucks lost, so they should leave. This set up the 8-man tag on the pay-per-view. Renee Paquette interviewed Toni Storm. Her new character, where she thinks she's a pampered 1940s movie star who gets no respect, is entertaining. It always ends with Storm storming off and throwing a shoe at Paquette. Jericho came out and said that this was the greatest weekend of his career, noting the Fozzy concert on Friday night and the match with Ospreay. He said it was one of his favorite matches of his career and put over the show being bigger to him than any WrestleMania he was on. He said he did regret blowing off Sammy Guevara and called him out. Jericho apologized and fans chanted "Hug it out." They shook hands. Guevara said he always had Jericho's back and a little push isn't going to break us up. That was the obvious reference. Jericho said he keeps playing the match back. Maybe he should have done this or that, and then mentioned maybe Guevara should have hit Ospreay harder with the bat. Guevara noted that he left his pregnant wife in Florida to go to London and have Jericho's back and didn't appreciate the line. Jericho said that Guevara got to be part of the biggest show in history and was on the show, and that tons of people in the company would have killed to have been on the show. Guevara brought up how Jericho was the first AEW champion and then lost the belt at a steakhouse. They appeared on the verge of breaking up, and Jericho said they've been together from the first episode of Dynamite and let's get back to being together and reunite the sex gods. He said maybe next year Guevara could be on the All In show. Jericho suggested they start teaming up next week to go after the tag team titles. Moxley did an interview for his title match and said the guy with the biggest bite will win. Eddie Kingston beat Wheeler Yuta in 8:42 with 2 spinning back fists. Good match. Guevara did an interview and Don Callis came out to recruit him. That scar is never going away. Callis tried to turn Guevara on Jericho and Guevara told him to shut up and he knows what he's up to and to leave. Adam Cole came out. He thanked everyone for making the show the most special time of his entire life. He said it was special but not quite perfect because he was in the main event but he lost. But he said he knows he'll get another shot. He said MJF has a bad neck but he'll be back. Roderick Strong, Mike Bennett and Matt Taven came out. Strong said that Cole cares more about MJF's neck than his neck. Cole said that this is ridiculous. Bennett cut a promo and talked about a match in 2010 in Ring of Honor when both wrestled each other in a tryout and how they both got each other their job in the company. He said that Cole was at his wedding and Cole hosted his bachelor party. Bennett brought up a bunch of different Ring of Honor arenas they traveled together to. Bennett said Cole cares far too much about what these idiots, fans, think and forgot about what the guys did for him. Cole said if he makes them feel that way he's so sorry. Cole said that Strong needs to understand that Max is his best friend. Strong went nuts and said he refuses to accept that. Strong said that he's entering the tournament for a shot at MJF and he's going to win the title with his real friends by his side. Cole said that was a terrible idea because Strong's neck isn't ready. Strong said he was winning the tournament because he's a wrestling legend. Penta and Alex Abrahams did a promo. Chris Statlander and Britt Baker and Hikaru Shida beat Nyla Rose and Marina Shafir and Emi Sakura in 7:18 when Statlander pinned Shafir with a tombstone. Ruby Soho ran out and hit the no future kick on Statlander and grabbed the belt, so that added a new title match to the pay-per-view. The Acclaimed and Billy Gunn came out. Max Caster talked about Chicago changing their lives. It was the reaction they got in losing to Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland in Chicago that led to them getting their big increased push. Caster talked about holding these titles with pride. They ended up unveiling new Pink Trios belts. Cassidy beat Penta in 16:55 to keep the international title in a 4 stars match. Cassidy did a tope and somehow Penta caught him in midair and pressed him overhead. I've never seen that before. Penta threw him into the barricade from there. Cassidy later hit a tope. Penta hit a tope con gyro. Penta hit the Fear Factor, package pile driver, on the apron but going for the pin, Cassidy got his hand on the ropes. Penta did the broken arm spot and another Fear Factor but Cassidy kicked out and got a crucifix pin. That back and forth Canadian Destroyer spot I first saw years ago in a match with Penta and Cody Rhodes in San Francisco, long before there was an AEW. It came from Mexico. Cassidy cut a promo and said he was tired, his body hurts and the belt in his backpack gets heavier each week. But he said he was here, he was wrestling, and that all along he's been told he's too skinny and he's too short and he's too different to make it in wrestling. Then he said, I'm Orange Cassidy, and I don't have a catchphrase. Which is a mock on all the guys who do pattern Miz-style promos. Moxley came out and they went face to face. A lot of people left before and during Rampage. It opened with a tag team battle royal for a Ring of Honor title shot, won by John Silver and Alex Reynolds. The other teams were Aussie Open, the Hardys Butcher, and Blade Toa Leona and Bishop Kwan, Ryan Nemeth, and Peter Avalon Dutch, and Vincent. The Outrunners, Chuck Taylor and Trent Beretta and Darius Martin and Action Andretti. The Hardys got the biggest pop. It came down to best friends, Aussie Open and Dark Order with Reynolds already dumped. Taylor was next. Beretta eliminated Kyle Fletcher leaving Beretta, Silver, and Mark Davis. Beretta threw out Davis. Silver, who was thrown out, but not over the top rope, came back in and dumped Beretta in 12 minutes. The crowd did the cell phones for a Bray Wyatt tribute and there was also a Terry Funk chant after that. Aussie Open attacked Jericho at the announce table and Guevara made the save. So likely Aussie Open versus Jericho and Guevara on Dynamite on September 3rd. Nick Wayne and El Hijo del Vikingo beat Gringo Loco and Kip Sabian in 7:30. All action. Sabian did a moonsault off the apron on Wayne. Gringo was very over and did a great-looking top rope Spanish fly on Wayne. The crowd was into Vikingo, and he did a top rope poison rana on Gringo while Wayne did a Fosbury flop on Sabian. Vikingo pinned Gringo with a 630 for the win in 9 minutes. This was said to be the best match of the taping. Adam Page pinned Brian Keith in 320 with the buckshot lariat. It was very physical. Willow Nightingale and Sky Blue beat Anna Jay and Taya Valkyrie in 8:30. Jay hit Valkyrie when Blue moved and Blue used code Blue on Jay for the win. Valkyrie jumped Blue after the match and Nightingale saved. Blue then called Valkyrie and Jay to get back in the ring after the show was over and settled this the Chicago way. They had a brawl again until Nightingale and Blue cleaned house. UFC. A lot happened in the Kungla lawsuit against UFC as U.S. District Court Judge Richard Boulware on August 21 said he wants to give priority to this case and wants the trial in March or April. UFC is filing an appeal that could slow this down on his class certification ruling, which makes the trial very dangerous for the UFC because it creates a plaintiff class of about 1,200 fighters who fought from 2010 to 2017 that would be part of the suit, claiming that UFC used its power on both fighters and in harming other companies getting started, which caused the fighters who be paid far less than they would have under free market conditions. In addition, he ruled that a second lawsuit that covers fighters after 2017 would be sent to trial shortly after the first one. The trial itself is expected to take 4 to 5 weeks. In addition, Boulware ruled that all discovery records that had been sealed would be unsealed, which would mean tons of evidence such as emails internally from UFC officers would become public record. The records will be unsealed after the end of October. UFC is arguing that the competition between MMA promotions are healthy and the barriers to become a promotion are low. They have filed an appeal to the 9th District Court in Nevada to reverse the ruling, claiming that Boulware has embraced an unprecedented theory by making his ruling based on the concept that UFC has not increased fighter pay at the same rate as it has increased revenue. The UFC claims that this ruling by Boulware would incentivize workers and independent contracts in other industries to claim injury under antitrust law if their compensation as a group doesn't grow at the same rate as the company's overall revenues. The UFC also claimed that the ruled damages of $1.6 billion for those years, which under an antitrust violation could be tripled to as much as $4.8 billion, was illogically excessive. They also claimed company profits for that period was only $235 million, likely because so much of the profits were distributed to the owners, and that is only 15% of the $1.6 billion the fighters are asking for. After a carriage price dispute, at this moment, and it will likely change quickly with college football starting, ESPN is no longer on Spectrum Cable, which means its homes will drop from 71 million to 57 million, and UFC and other ESPN properties will have 20% less exposure. If it goes any length of time, people will start switching providers, and DirecTV and Dish may benefit, and the number will boost from 57 million, but doubtful it will be close to 71 million until the dispute is settled. Dana White responded to a story in the Daily Mail that Ronda Rousey could return at UFC 300. White said not the case, that Rousey wants to have more kids and has moved on with her life. We had been told dating back months that Rousey wanted to have more children and had given WWE a final date, and that her idea was to form the tag team with Shayna Baszler and put Baszler over Strong and leave. At that point, rumors about her fighting came out, but we were told she's wanting a larger family and there are no plans for her to either fight or do pro wrestling in the foreseeable future. The belief is that she has no interest in fighting ever again. White's home in Maine was broken into and he made it public, showing a video on Instagram of someone attempting to kick in the door and rip off the camera. He offered a reward to anyone who could find the guy, and he was arrested hours later. Brady Cooper, 23, was charged in the case. Michael Chandler said that he doesn't care if Conor McGregor has 6 months of USADA testing before their planned fight. He noted that he signed with UFC in September 2020 and fought the next month, so he only had 1 month of testing from USADA. He had been an active fighter with Bellator and was drug tested by the commissions as a main eventer, but that is a very different threshold. The UFC rules are that if they sign active fighters, they don't have to have 6 months clean testing. It's only if fighters retire and come back, with the idea that circumvents fake retirements, getting on juice, cleaning out your system to where you can pass a test and then fighting right away. The idea is to prove a retirement is real, that when you return, you hate to do 6 months of clean tests. The other idea is that if you retire but have a thought to coming back, like Uriah Faber has done for example, you retire but you stay in the testing program, so if a fight comes along, you've been tested, so it's not a fake retirement to load up on steroids and come back stronger. But this was waived for Brock Lesnar, and while not officially waived for Conor McGregor, there has certainly been talk that it will be. It defeats the entire purpose of stringent testing when people who can draw, who by their bank accounts will have access to the most updated ways to beat testing to begin with, and get the rule not to apply to them. McGregor had said he would fight on December 16th, which would not allow the 6 months since he hasn't enrolled in USADA testing. McGregor later said UFC is not going to let him fight on that show. Dana White has said they are looking for a date in early 2024. Henry Cejudo claimed that Sean O'Malley's pay-per-view drawing power is overrated, saying that the O'Malley vs. Aljamain Sterling show did 350,000 buys. O'Malley claimed that he just spoke to UFC and they told him it had topped 570,000 buys and that Sterling's defense against Cejudo did 135,000 buys. UFC itself never talks pay-per-view numbers because the contract with ESPN doesn't allow them to do so, as ESPN is the only entity with the right to release the numbers and they only seem to do so when it tops 1 million, or basically McGregor fights. However, the prelims before O'Malley vs. Sterling did do the highest ratings of any prelim since Colby Covington vs. Jorge Masvidal, so the higher number sounds more likely. By the way, both are trying to build up a potential fight with this verbiage. Chris Weidman suffered a leg fracture but no ligament damage in his return fight with Brad Tavares. This week's show is an ESPN Plus show from Paris, France from noon to 6 p.m. on September 3rd. The top bouts are Shulgane vs. Sergey Spivaks and Manon Fiorot vs. Rose Namajunas as Namajunas moves up to flyweight. Mayra Bueno Silva said that she had failed a pre-fight drug test before her July 15 win over Holly Holm. Even though the test she failed was taken before the fight, the results didn't come in until after the fight, and thus the fight wasn't cancelled. Silva said she tested positive for a substance consistent with her prescription medication she takes for ADHD. She said she was fully cooperating with USADA and the UFC as well as the Nevada Athletic Commission. Mackenzie Dern will face Jessica Andrade on her November 11th show in Madison Square Garden. Kai Kara France, who was to face Manel Kape on the September 9th pay-per-view show in Sydney, Australia, announced he was having to pull out of the show due to suffering a concussion in training. Joe Lauzon, who hasn't fought since 2019, said that he was hoping to get on the August 19th show in Boston for a retirement fight in his home city. Dana White talked about the subject and confirmed Lauzon asked but said when he asked they already had a full card. White also said that he would like Lauzon to retire, just as he would like Chris Weidman to retire. Bellator. Ilima Leigh McFarlane in the days after the fires in Maui raised $2,532,039 for the victims. Other MMA. The PFL show on August 23rd at the theater in Madison Square Garden featured the women's featherweight and men's heavyweight semifinals. All 4 semifinal matches ended in the first round. In the men's heavyweight division, Renan Ferreira knocked out Maurice Green in 4:46 with punches and Dennis Goltsov submitted Jordan Heiderman in 4:16 with an arm triangle. Defending champion Larissa Pacheco continued her winning streak beating Olena Kolesnik in 14 seconds with punches. It was Pacheco's 9th win in a row in PFL competition dating back to her 2019 loss to Kayla Harrison, who Pacheco beat in last year's championship match. Marina Muknakina will be her opponent in the finals, having finished Amber Leibrick with an armbar in 1:45. Savannah Marshall, the world women's super middleweight boxing champion, has signed a multi-year deal with the PFL. Marshall, who represented the U.K. was the 2012 world amateur champion at middleweight and is 13-1 as a pro. Marshall joins Amanda Serrano and Clarissa Shields in doing MMA, because there is more money available. She was the WBO middleweight champion from 2020 to 2022 but lost it last year to Shields via 10-round decision in a match for a number of Shields middleweight belts as well. She beat Shields in 2012 when both were amateurs. Demetrius Johnson, the current ONE champion at 135 pounds and former longtime UFC champion at 125, competed in the IBJJF Masters World BJJ Championships this past week in Las Vegas and took first place. Johnson, competing at 154.6 pounds, his real weight without cutting, his first BJJ competition ever, took first in his division. WWE. After the tease all week of Edge's contract expiring in Toronto being his last match, Edge left things ambiguous after the SmackDown show. He did say in an interview on the fan radio in Toronto that his contract expires at the end of September. The Toronto show was the final match of the deal. His wording is that he believed that was his last match ever in Toronto, specifying the city. Clearly from how it was played up on the TV show in the days leading up to it that WWE never said it was his last match and he never said it was his last match, but they wanted the tease out there for interest in the show and ratings. It sounded like he would do another match like a retirement deal at WrestleMania or something else. Because Christian is in AEW on a long-term contract, there had been rumors he may do something there, but at the same time one would think it is more likely his last match would be in WWE on a major event. There had been talk within wrestling for months about the idea that Edge, when this contract was up, would reunite with Christian in some form in AEW. I don't know how serious that is, but it was something talked about behind the scenes as a possibility, which is why all kinds of rumors started about All In when people thought the contract was expiring after Toronto. On the radio show he claimed he had not decided what to do next. I think the idea was to get the word about that Toronto could be his last match, so the response would have to be that he hasn't made a decision whether he had or had not. But just the nature of how it was promoted, as more than just a 25th anniversary celebration, and that he didn't announce his retirement indicates he is probably on the way out, but also would more likely wrestle another match, or perhaps a few more matches. I mean, I can't say I haven't thought about it. I have for sure. But I realize that I haven't come to any conclusions. And I'm kind of torn, honestly. Because I don't want to do this to the point where I don't feel like I'm able to have the output that I want. Because only I know how I feel when I'm deep into a match and go, oof, man, okay, didn't do enough cardio, or man, I did all that cardio and I'm still feeling this way. That's why I really want to collect myself after this thing. Take just a big old deep breath and just decide what that is. My contract is up at the end of September. This is my last contracted match. So I have a lot of decisions to make. But I can't do it now. I think I almost got to see how Friday goes in a weird way. I know that's not a clear answer, but I don't have it yet. After SmackDown went off the air, he said he doesn't know what the future holds for him. He's going to talk to his family this week and see what they want him to do. But he did say it was probably his last match in Toronto. After pinning Sheamus in a great television match, they hugged and then took a photo of them drinking a pint of Guinness together backstage after the show. Since that time, it was noted that Edge and WWE are said to be significantly apart on terms for a new contract. Those in WWE have noted that they expect Edge to go to AEW. Edge denied that and said he had a contract offer from WWE but had not decided what to do next. He said that he'd consider the show in Toronto a perfect farewell and doesn't need to have a farewell at WrestleMania next year. Edge will do what he will do, as a few years ago, while not reported at the time, those in AEW were of the belief Edge was coming in. And obviously he then signed a 3-year deal at $3 million per year for limited dates with WWE, which was more than AEW had offered. The Disney Plus show Percy Jackson and the Olympians, where Adam Copeland, Edge, has a recurring role as Ares, the god of war, will debut on December 20th. His character is described as being handsome and arrogant but kind of dumb and one quick to get into conflict. Cena returns on the September 1st SmackDown show in Hershey, Pennsylvania. The show was almost sold out, and when the announcement was made about Cena, then almost all the remaining tickets went almost instantly. With such a scarcity of tickets and Cena being announced, the scalpers are going to make money on this show. Cena is also doing the September 8th show in India, being pushed that it will be the first time Cena wrestles in India. This is a deal where WWE's television partners are basically buying a show for a live special, and it was a deal strong enough to get Cena. Cena and Rollins vs. Kaiser and Vinci is on the show. The show is not being broadcast on Peacock, but likely is in India. The show is being held in a building set up for about 4,000 seats, so it's not like they're running a big building, but it will be heavily promoted by the station. The show would have likely sold out either way, but once Cena was announced it sold out and could have drawn a lot more, as Cena is very well known in India. It looks like Cena will be around for a SmackDown program for 2 months, as he's also booked September 15th in Denver, September 22nd in Glendale, Arizona, September 29th in Sacramento, California, October 6th in St. Louis, October 13th in Tulsa, October 20th in San Antonio, and October 27th in Milwaukee. Most likely this has to do with a writer's strike, meaning stuff he would normally be doing is shut down for the time being. He hasn't been advertised for pay-per-view shows yet. The WWE has partnered with the NFL to release championship belts for all the NFL teams, which just went on sale for $549.99 per belt. The Jacksonville Jaguars belt was pulled on the first day it was released. The Jaguars are owned by Shad Khan. The decision was made by the Jaguars for the obvious reason, since Shad Khan is co-owner of AEW, and it would seem that in a wrestling war that your football team would market WWE title belts. WWE made the deal and was told all 32 teams were going to be involved, and they were released with that idea, and shortly after release the Jaguars found out and opted out. Attorney Konstantin Kairos, who spearheaded the failed lawsuit with dozens of clients against WWE over concussions, had been sanctioned and ordered when the case was thrown out to pay the WWE's legal costs. WWE was asking for $533,926.44, but the court ruled the fair amount was $313,143.55. Kairos tried to get that ruling overturned in the Second Court of Appeals in New York, but the court upheld the original financial agreement of $313,143.55. The court also ruled that Kairos had to tell any prospective client that was a wrestler that he had been sanctioned in court. When it comes to the Peacock major shows, NBCU has told WWE that the number they look at mainly is viewership number after 24 hours. It's not a thing about live, and they've noticed that for some of the shows outside North America that start earlier, that they may not get as many viewers because they aren't in prime time live, but it's about people watching over the next 24 hours. My thought is that if you have the results already, you are less likely to spend $50 to $80 for a replay, although AEW has been doing extremely well for replay buys. But for a Peacock subscriber that likes WWE, even if they get the results, it's a big show and people will watch not live because it's about the entire story and the entertainment and not just winning and losing. Brian Pillman Jr. passed medicals and started this week. As noted, he will debut in NXT and has to be based in Orlando. It is not known if he can keep his name or not. That decision will come when and if they want to start him on television. Belair has been given some time off. Woods will be off Raw next week due to Whiplash, which is storyline based. For Canadian ratings the past 2 weeks, Raw on August 21st did 299,200 viewers and 137,725 to 54. NXT on August 22nd did 70,800 viewers and 35,125 to 54. AEW on August 23rd did 116,100 viewers and 68,225 to 54. SmackDown on August 25th did 214,200 viewers and 76,525 to 54. Raw on August 28th did 199,600 viewers and 78,825 to 54. NXT on August 29th did 61,000 viewers and 21,925 to 54. AEW on August 30th did 134,000 viewers and 74,625 to 54. The Pat McAfee Show starts on ESPN and ESPN Plus starting on September 7th, the same day the NFL season kicks off. The show will air from noon to 3 p.m. Eastern on weekdays on ESPN Plus and YouTube, with the first 2 hours also airing on ESPN. The cafe that Macy Estrella, the former Lacey Evans, is opening is named the Sunny Summers Cafe in Beaufort, South Carolina, and opens on August 21st. Estrella said that she wants to help the local community and that her cafe would be used as a place to host local AA meetings and host seminars and classes for women and military spouses on skill to allow that to get jobs and follow their goals and aspirations. WrestleNomics noted a press release from the Government of Wales that claimed Clash at the Castle put £21.8 million into the Cardiff economy and said that it was 10 times what the government spent to get the show. It was known Cardiff bid several million for the show while London would not, which is why they went to Cardiff. 10% of 21.8 million is £2.18 million or $2.77 million. When previously asked, the government wouldn't say what they spent for the show. The long-term company goal is to get a government subsidy for all pay-per-view events. This past year they got them for SummerSlam, Clash at the Castle, the Saudi shows, Royal Rumble, WrestleMania and Backlash in San Juan, $1.5 million. UFC gets them for many events. There was recent discussion with UFC in Hawaii and it came out UFC was asking for $6 million to run there, which was turned down. Gable Steveson will be competing in the World Championships in a few weeks in Belgrade, Serbia. Steveson in his few matches this year looked more dominant than ever before, even when he won a gold medal in 2021. But the World Championships are a very different level than the US National Championships. Owens returned in a dark match on the August 18th SmackDown tapings in Toronto and worked the weekend house shows. Angel Garza has been teasing something Perros del Mal related. We do know an idea batted around is for the Garza cousins to eventually be involved with the LWO, but that's one of those things down the line that could easily change. The idea right now is for them to be a tag team in NXT and if they get some steam there, bring them back to the main roster but likely with a new name since part of these vignettes seems to be to drop the chasing women and get serious about wrestling, meaning the Los Lotharios name being dropped. Again, long-term a lot can happen. Nikki Cross is working on a PhD in history while she will be continuing her career. Notes from the August 18th SmackDown show in Toronto. The show drew a sellout of 14,291 fans to the Scotiabank Arena with 13,100 paid. One thing noted to us from multiple people is how insane the line for merchandise was at this show. Edge shirts sold out instantly. Grimes pinned Odyssey Jones in the opening dark match. The crowd chanted yes when Grimes threw a series of kicks to the chest. Night was super over in the building but this was Edge's night. After the show Edge thanked Ron Hutchison, his trainer, who was very emotional about it, as well as wife Beth and his family. He also asked that everyone give Sheamus cheers. The dark match main event saw the return of Owens, teaming with Zayn and McIntyre over Imperium. Owens pinned Vinci after a stunner, when Edge did a run-in and speared Vinci. McIntyre hit the Claymore on Gunther and Zayn hit the hell of a kick on Kaiser before the finish. Zayn thanked Edge and said that all three of them, Owens, Zayn and McIntyre, looked up to Edge and they all posed together. Notes from the August 21st Raw show in Quebec City. It wasn't much of a show storyline-wise, although they did spend the show building up the planned Priest and Balor split, with Ripley being Peacemaker and getting tired of them not getting along. The show was also built around Zayn and Owens being in Quebec and getting great reactions and being put over in the main event, where they teamed with Rhodes to beat Priest and Balor and Dominic Mysterio, which kinds of feels like every Raw main event. They had a great IC title match where Gable beat Gunther via count out. It was Gunther's first singles loss on Raw. Tozawa also got his first singles win on Raw in 6 years when he beat Miz somewhat due to distraction from Knight to build up Knight versus Miz on the Payback. The show drew 10,717 with 9,700 paid. For main event, Natalya beat Tegan Nox and Cruz beat Moss. Report by Brian Alvarez. Sami came out and the place went nuts for him. He worked them into a frenzy and finally welcomed them to Raw. But before he could say any more, out came Judgment Day. Which was fine because they'd been cheering for about 5 minutes. They surrounded the ring. Sami said, "Listen, before you do whatever you're about to do, I have one question for you. Did you really think I would come here, of all the places, alone?" Owens then returned to a massive pop. The two of them laid out Dom, Finn, and Priest, and the heels bailed. Kevin said it had been far too long since he'd had a match on Raw, so how about tonight it's Kevin and Sami versus any two of Judgment Day. New Day beat Riddle and McIntyre. McIntyre grabbed Riddle and gave him a belly-to-belly over the top onto the heels outside, and they both celebrated and gave each other the thumbs up. The Viking Raiders ran out and Eric yanked Drew off the apron. Kofi then tagged in and hit Trouble in Paradise on Riddle for the pin. Even though the Viking Raiders took out Drew, they beat up New Day afterwards. Drew then returned and laid both of them out all by himself. McDonagh said he only wanted what was best for Finn. He was like an older brother to him, and he hoped Judgment Day only got stronger. Finn said, "Listen, last week Judgment Day laid out Zayn and Rhodes because of his help. Rhea and Dom showed up and said they needed to talk about which two guys were facing Kevin and Sami later, and they didn't want JD going with them. So Finn told him he'd talk to him later." Baszler video package. She's gonna burn down WWE. Gunther promo about how Gable's fairy tale story was going to end tonight. Maxine said Gable had been working for his moment for 10 years, and while people might think the disgusting ogre is unbeatable, if anyone can do the impossible, it's him. Gable beat Gunther via count out in an IC title match, which was Gunther's first singles loss on the main roster since his call-up. But no title change. Chad tackled him and hit the ground and pound, then hit a huge delayed German for a near fall. Chad went up top but Gunther shoved him off into the barricade. He went after him and Chad ended up posting him and then giving him a German suplex over the barricade into the timekeeper's area. He hit the ring and beat the count, so he won the match via count out, but not the title. Gunther pitched a fit afterwards and screamed at Imperium. Finn said he thinks the team tonight should be him and Dom. Priest said, "Listen, Dom is North American champion and I'm Mr. Money in the Bank, so I think it should be me and Dom." Finn was insulted. Rhea yelled at them, saying he thought they'd settled this. They said they did. She said, "Listen, I have something to deal with, so figure this out before I get back." Gunther was freaking out on Imperium after the break. After he left, Kaiser told Vinci that Gunther was right. "What are you going to do?" He stormed off. Rhodes made fun of JD for looking like a Funko Pop. He said, "Listen, this setting backstage isn't working, let's take a walk." He walked him out through the curtain to where the fans were. He then cut a promo saying Judgment Day had the numbers advantage, and if there was one place where the numbers didn't matter, it was right here in Quebec. He wanted the Judgment Day to hear the fans, whether they would be in the corner of Sami and Kevin tonight. He said they would not be alone because he was going to be watching closely. But tonight was going to be about Kevin and Sami. We were going to watch the Judgment Day rise and fall tonight. Nakamura did an entire promo in Japanese with English subtitles. He said everyone was asking what he said to Seth Rollins last week. What he could have possibly said that filled Seth with such fear. Seth was a man who had it all, a champion, but he knew Seth. He knew his weakness. I whispered to Seth, "I know about your back." Seth's back has been broken for many years. He lives in pain. This pain has created a void nothing can fill. No matter how successful he is, he's in pain. When he hugs his wife, picks up his child, he is filled with pain. Every day of his life he's in pain. And now his worst fears are coming true, because Shinsuke can break him once and for all. He and Seth are not so different, they live by the same code, a code tattooed on Seth's back, the very same back that is failing. It is failing like he is failing to live by that code. His body has crumbled under the pressure of his own vanity. Are you satisfied with what you have done with your life? Because Nakamura will not be satisfied until he removes the burden and breaks him once and for all. Watch your back. Ripley beat LeRae. Rhea then reversed a cradle and put LeRae in the prism lock for the submission. This went about a minute. Rodriguez came out on a crutch afterwards, very dramatically limping. You know what that means? Yes, she threw down the crutch and attacked Rhea. They brawled in the ring and Rodriguez made a big comeback and laid her out with a lariat and an SOS slam. So it's Raquel versus Rhea for the title at the pay-per-view. Ciampa said he'd be lying if he didn't want Gable's spot in the Intercontinental title match. He didn't come back to be this close, he came back to be the guy. He's been him before. So he's going to be the change he wants. He's not here to play games, he's here to take over the game. Miz said on SmackDown, LA Knight lost a match to get a United States title shot. People are blaming him, he says, but on the big show there's no room for excuses. Things happen. He said at WrestleMania The Rock interfered in his match with John Cena but he still retained the title. In 20 years we won't even remember LA Knight. Pierce gave him the chance to choose an opponent, so he's choosing someone bigger and strong and more talented than Knight. Tozawa came out. Miz tried to interview him but Tozawa kept doing LA Knight's yeah. Miz yelled at him, saying this was the opportunity of a lifetime, and asking if he thought this was funny. He then booted him. Tozawa beat Miz. Knight immediately came out. Miz was distracted and Tozawa ran wild early. Miz started yelling at Knight, who was doing commentary. He went for the big senton but Miz got the knees up. He went for the skull-crushing finale and said this was for Knight, at which point Tozawa cradled and pinned him. Knight hit the ring and hit Miz with the BFT. Riddle was celebrating with Drew backstage. Drew said, "Listen, I've got enough drama to deal with. This tag thing just isn't going to work out, I don't think." New Day showed up and said, "Listen, don't go so fast, you got a good thing going here. You gave us a hell of a fight and you've got potential. And we've got a great name for you, Riddle." They said they were going to take out the Viking Raiders next week, and after that, if they wanted a rematch, they could have it. Riddle was all excited, and begged him not to give up on him. "Let's tag one more time, bro." Drew walked off and Riddle said, "That wasn't a no." Priest met with Dom and Rhea. Rhea was pissed that Priest and Finn couldn't work it out, so she said they're going to do it her way from now on. Lynch came out. She said she had determined that his legacy would not be determined by wins or losses or titles, but by survival. You can do whatever you want to her but she'll always come back, not because she's unbeatable, but because she's unstoppable and she'll always fight. Which brings her to Stratus. They're going to have a steel cage match, but there is still some business with Stark. Out came Trish and Zoe. Trish said it was so nice to be here in her home country of Canada, away from the US a holes. They chanted, "Thank you Trish," but she said no thank you, Quebec. Then she buried them, saying they're not even Toronto. The fans weren't really going for the heel shtick. She said she had good news and bad news for Becky. She was going to beat Becky and prove she was the greatest of all time. Bad news is you've got me in a steel cage. I've never been in a cage match before. Am I scared? Yeah, I am scared. But was I scared when I was 24 and thrown into a WWE ring for the first time with no experience? Yeah, I was, but I killed it. I was scared when I was the first woman to main event Raw, but I killed it. I've been thrown into the fire multiple times and I've killed it, and I'll stand tall in that cage match. You'll see a side of me you've never seen before in that cage. You won't survive this one, bitch. Becky said she was so scared. And oh yeah, next week it'll be me and Zoe in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Welcome to the big time. Green and Niven are officially the new tag team champions. Green and Niven beat Chance and Carter. His story is that Chelsea can't do anything, so Piper tags in and hits one big move, in this case the running crossbody, and got the pin. Rollins was so concerned about Shinsuke's threat in that video earlier that he showed up in a ridiculous outfit, let the fans sing his song, and then laugh like a maniac. Then he had to get serious. He said, "If we're being honest, I do have 2 fractures in my lumbar spine. I've been living with that injury for 4 years and it doesn't get better by itself. It gets worse, and I don't know what the end game is. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to keep doing this at the level I'm running at. That's part of the gig. If Shinsuke wants to bring it up and target my injuries and take cheap shots, But if he wants to bring my family into it, my wife and my daughter and my livelihood into this, then he better be prepared to face me man to man. But you're not, are you? You're not even here tonight, are you? You're in a studio 1,000 miles away, too afraid to face me. Next week, I'm going to give you one more chance to play your mind games. Balor and Priest beat Owens and Zayn via DQ right away. McDonough ran down and threw the briefcase into the ring to Finn. But Kevin grabbed it and hit Finn for the DQ. Then we got a brawl afterwards. Priest laid out Owens and screamed at McDonough for being an idiot. Sami took out JD and then Dom went after Sami. We got a 3-on-2 beatdown which led to a Cody chant. Cody then demanded a 6-man, and Adam Pearce came out and signed it. Cody and Kevin and Sami versus Finn and Dom and Priest. Dom tried the frog splash but Sami got the knees up and tagged Cody. He hit the double Cody cutter on Dom and Priest for a near fall. He hit Balor with the crossroads, then Dom. He tagged in Sami and Sami hit the running kick in the corner. He then tagged in Kevin, who hit the stunner for the pin. The Tribute SmackDown on August 25th in Louisville, Kentucky drew 9,189, 8,400 paid. Notes from the August 28th Raw in Memphis. The show drew 7,377, 6,700 paid. Report by Brian Alvarez. They announced Judgment Day versus Sami and Kevin for the tag titles at the pay-per-view. Priest beat Zayn. Good match as you'd expect. Zayn went for the kick but McDonough grabbed his foot behind the ref's back. Priest then hit South of Heaven for the pin. Simple finish to set up the title match, plus it plays into the story because Priest hates JD but JD helped him win. JD tried to raise Priest's hand afterwards but Priest shoved him down and told him to get out of his business. Owens then showed up and they ping-ponged JD around the ring and Kevin gave him the stunner. Priest saw it and did nothing to help. McIntyre was irritated seeing Riddle. Riddle had photoshopped a pic of him with new Riddle gear on. Riddle said, well, if you don't like it, let's get matching kilts. McIntyre was mad but Riddle said, New Day is wrestling tonight, let's sit ringside and watch their match. McIntyre said, maybe that's a good idea, I'd love to see those idiots lose. Riddle thought he was talking about New Day, but he was talking about the Viking Raiders. Miz came out dressed as Knight. Miz cosplaying Knight, who is cosplaying Rock, and Austin is quite the visual. He did a Knight impersonation which might be the best thing he's done in WWE maybe ever. He said he had a bag full of free Knight t-shirts. Of course he did not give anyone free shirts. Then he went back to being Miz and it was much less exciting. He said Knight was vanilla, a geek right out of 1997. Viking Raiders beat New Day. Riddle and Drew came out to watch. Match was good. Ivar slammed Kingston onto Drew and Riddle on the outside. Drew then started throwing chairs. Well, one hit the ring and the other hit Xavier. The announcers claimed it was an accident but from the angle it looked like he purposely threw it right at Xavier. Vikings then double-teamed Kofi and crushed him with their double-team finish for the pin. Finn was yelling at Priest backstage. Priest said, yes, we need to get this together, we need to focus on our business instead of focusing on people who don't matter, like McDonough. Finn said that dude is the only reason that you beat Sami tonight, then you beat him up afterwards. Priest said, I don't give a shit about that guy, and if you're so concerned with him maybe you should take a walk. Rhea jumped in and said, every week without fail we fall apart because you two can't get along. The only people handling Judgment Day business right now are myself and Dirty Dom. So here's what's going to happen. Make it right at Payback, remind everyone that we win when it matters. If we don't all walk out with gold, there might be some changes around here. Kofi met with Riddle and Drew. He said Woods was gonna be okay. Drew apologized, saying the chair thing was an accident, and Kofi said cheap shots like that aren't in your wheelhouse, so it's all good. Drew then said he wanted to take out the Viking Raiders and was going to do it next week in a match where he didn't even have to tag in. Kofi didn't know what that meant but Riddle was all excited thinking it meant they were going to be a team. Gunther came out for a promo on the announce table. He said last week Gable made history. Last week, he became the first man to beat me in more than 500 days, but it was by count out. Technically he gained a victory, but in reality he has won nothing. I'm still here as your Intercontinental Champion. Next week, Gable will challenge me for the Intercontinental title on Raw. But just like he's not going to beat me next week, tonight there will not be my best man here. Gable beat Kaiser. They had a scary spot early where Chad sent him outside and Kaiser landed on his head right on the floor, but he was back up working immediately. They had a good match. Even though he landed on his head, the story was that he injured his wrist on the bump, So Gable worked over the wrist on his comeback. Gable did a series of rolling belly-to-belly suplexes, which were awesome. Gable had a bloody lip. He hit a big moonsault off the post and his legs hit the guy, so his face ended up hitting the ground on the landing. Gable went for the Chaos Theory and Vinci ran in for the DQ. That was infuriating given the length of the match. Also, given that nobody believes Gable is going to win, he needs a super push, so in no universe should he not have beaten Kaiser here. Otis hit the ring and we had a four-way brawl. They tossed Otis and double-teamed Gable. Then Gunther came down to the ring and Gable tried to counter into an ankle lock, but they stomped him down and triple-teamed him. Gunther then power-bombed him. We got a Bob Barker tribute video. He was the best guest host they ever had. This video was short, but awesome. Rollins came out with a Wyndham armband on, and opened up with Yowie Wowie. He said it had been a long week, so he was going to keep this short and sweet. He said he was going to give Nakamura a shot at his belt this weekend. So how about Nakamura come out and give him what he wanted? If Nakamura had some mean things to say, he should come down and say it to his face. Nakamura didn't come out. Rollins said let's go get some drinking done. But then a video appeared on the big screen, another awesome Nakamura video. It showed Nakamura doing karate in his gi and rolling. He said he didn't want to simply defeat the champion, he wanted to dismantle the man himself. He wanted his wife to know he is the reason she has to help him out of bed. He's the reason he won't be able to walk his daughter down the aisle on her wedding day. I will break him, because he can be broken. His body has betrayed him, he knows this. So I am going to destroy his back, and put him out of his misery. He has no honor, he has no code, he has no future. This was incredible. Rollins said I want to know what happened to the Nakamura that headlined the Tokyo Dome, the Shinsuke that lit the world on fire when he came to NXT. A month ago, Shinsuke, I'd have given you the shirt off my back. The same back that is broken in two places. But my broken back didn't stand in the way of me becoming the World Heavyweight Champion, or beating your ass at Payback. Nakamura hit the ring through the crowd, laid out Rollins with a kick, whispered in his ear and then kicked him again. I told you, he said, to watch your back. Zayn said if Judgment Day wanted to do this one more time, fine, they'd do it one more time. Owens said the rules won't play in your favor, we are sick of this. So we got something made official, in the Steel City it'll be a Pittsburgh Steel City cage match for the titles. Ciampa beat Reed. Reed went for a lariat but Ciampa turned it into a crucifix bomb for the pin. Lynch talked about her Falls Count Anywhere match with Zoe later. Ripley came out for a promo about Rodriguez. She said Rodriguez was talking tough but she also had to play up an injury to get the jump on her. She said that would never happen again. I'm not going to come out here and tell you about all my accomplishments. This championship proves absolutely everything. But Raquel thinks she'll take my title at the pay-per-view. That's another reason she's an idiot. Rodriguez laid out Rhea. Dom jumped in the ring so Raquel went after him. This allowed Rhea to hit the ring and go for a riptide, but Raquel countered and laid her out a second time. Lynch beat Stark. They had Tiffany Stratton in the front row watching on. They had a hardcore match, the usual, kendo sticks and the like. Then they did a spot where Trish was trying to throw a chair into the ring and she hit Zoe hard right in the eye with the edge of the chair. The belief is that was a total accident, and based on watching it multiple times, how the chair hit her and how she responded to it, I'm pretty much certain it was. Stratus, because these rules are stupid, would interfere right in front of the ref because there were no DQs, but otherwise just stood at ringside like another manager. That made zero sense. Lynch hit the manhandle slam and Stratus hit the ring to break up the pin. Then she just went outside to manage again. Stark did a springboard but landed right on Becky's knee and Becky immediately grabbed at it. So hopefully she didn't get hurt. Stratus gave her a bulldog off the barricade through another table. Lynch kicked out. They brawled on another platform and Zoe threw a punch and accidentally knocked Stratus off the platform through a table. Lynch then hit the manhandle slam off the platform through another table for the pin. Aside from the goofy rules, this turned into a very good Falls Count Anywhere match. The show ended with Lynch in tears holding up a Bray armband, and she cut a really nice promo about him after the show went off the air. House shows for the last 2 weeks saw August 19th in Ottawa draw 4,887, August 20th in Laval, Quebec drew 7,012, which is great for a modern house show number. August 26th in Cape Girardeau, Missouri drew 3,482, August 27th in Huntsville, Alabama drew 4,546. In Ottawa, it opened with McIntyre and Owens and Zayn over Imperium when Owens pinned Kaiser after a stunner. McIntyre hit Gunther with a Claymore kick and Zayn gave Vinci the hell of a kick right before the finish. Ripley beat Natalya to keep the World Women's title with the Riptide. Dominic wasn't at the show, so nobody was at ringside with Ripley. Sky won a three-way over Flair and Asuka to keep the WWE Women's title. Flair gave Asuka a spear and then Sky threw Flair out of the ring and pinned Asuka. Crowd loved the match and Sky worked like a babyface and was cheered like a face. No Bayley at this show either. Rhodes pinned Priest after 3 crossroads. Ripley came out with Priest and she held the briefcase. Ripley interfered at different points. Ripley threw her belt in the ring and the ref took it and was distracted. Ripley then gave Priest the briefcase. He used it but Rhodes still kicked out of the pin. Styles and Gallows and Anderson beat Theory and Benjamin and Alexander. Styles pinned Theory with a phenomenal forearm. Lynch beat Stratus and Stark in a handicap match. Lynch pinned Stark with a manhandle slam. Stratus came out and cut a heel promo since she's Canadian and would likely have been cheered. Stratus said after weeks of dealing with assholes in America, she was glad to be back in Canada. She said this was the first time in about 18 years that she's wrestled at a live event, house show. But she said it meant absolutely nothing for her because she was wrestling in the butthole of Canada. She said it's not like Ottawa is special like Toronto is. Main event saw Rollins retain the world title over Balor in a street fight after a powerbomb into a table and a curb stomp. Laval was pretty much the same show with all the same results. In the opening trios match it was Zayn pinning Vinci with a hell of a kick after Owens and McIntyre did their finishes to Kaiser and Gunther. The straightest match was the same with the same heel promo to start. Ripley teased singing happy birthday to ring announcer Byron Saxton, who turned 42. Then she said she didn't care about his birthday. Later in the show Rhodes led the crowd in singing happy birthday to Saxton. NXT ran 2 shows this weekend, with an August 18th show in Citrus Springs, Florida and an August 19th show in Tampa. Citrus Springs saw Tyler Bate and Andre Chase and Duke Hudson over Charlie Dempsey and Damon Kemp and Miles Bourne, their Waterboy on TV. Dante Chan upset Wolfgang. Gigi Dolan beat Carmen Petrovic. Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen beat Tyson DuPont and Tyreek Igwe. Nathan Fraser retained the Heritage Cup over Luca Cruzifino. Oro Mensah and Noam Dar and Jakara Jackson and Lash Legend beat Dragon Lee and Eddie Thorpe and Roxanne Perez and Lyra Valkyria. Javier Bernal beat Ike Manjiro. Lola Vice and Elektra Lopez and Jade Gentile beat JC Jane, Kiana James and Tiana Caffey. Main event saw Tony D'Angelo and Stax Lorenzo retain the tag titles over the Dyad. Tampa saw Giro no contest Quincy Elliott when Braun Breaker came out and speared both guys. Breaker cut a heel promo and challenged anyone in the dressing room to come out. Trick Williams came out and rolled up Breaker, which I guess tells you what they think of him. He can talk like a star and has the right look and is tall, so he's got what they are looking for, just has to get his in-ring up to main roster level. Danny Palmer and Kalani Jordan beat Blair Davenport and Izzy Dane. Joe Coffey beat Anjay Hayes Murray, who I think made his debut. Hank Walker and Tank Ledger beat Bronco Nima and Scripps. Nima, Scripps and Lucien Price all attacked Walker and Ledger after the match until Axiom made the save. Ava beat Ivy Nile. This was to give them practice before their TV match and was Ava's first singles match. It also says a lot for Nile that they trusted her, as new as she is, to be the one for Ava's first match. Idris Enof and Malik Blade beat Hayden Pittman and Bo Morris. Tiffany Stratton retained the women's title over Valentine Feroz. Carmelo Hayes retained the NXT title in the main event over Gacy. Ava distracted the ref and Gacy got a chair. Wes Lee came out and stopped Gacy from hitting Hayes with the chair. Hayes pinned Gacy. Hayes and Wesley argued in the ring after the match, but then shook hands. And Wrestling Observer Newsletter, September 4, 2023. Thanks for listening. See you next time.